Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well today. We have not done this in a little while now. We took a little bit of a break because things were quiet. Things are not quiet anymore. Things are not peaceful anymore. Things are happening. Things are being talked about happening. Things are starting to fire off. So we got to talk about it. So I am Brendan. That is Brandon. How you doing today, Brandon?
Doing great. A lot of excitement rolling on here as we're leading into free agency. So Seahawks always keep you on your toes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The NFL is a year-long event. It never really stops. Maybe you get a couple of weeks here and there, but for the most part, things just keep on moving. So I'll tell you, we had a plan for today's show, and we will still execute most of that plan. But the plan has been thrown off just a little bit by the events of the last couple of days. So we are going to initially spend some time talking about the recent happenings with the Seattle Seahawks. So that sound good to you, Brandon?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right. So let's open things up with the last couple of days. Initially, it just looked like a normal cleaning of the roster. We released 5 players. I don't have a lot to say about those 5 releases, though, personally, because to me, they were all very obviously going to happen, and I was prepared for it, and I'm not overly wrapped up in any of that. So it was Lockett, Draymond Jones, George Fant, Rayshon Jenkins, Roy Robertson Harris, and I believe that's it. So any thoughts about anything to say about that beyond the obvious?
No, it was house cleaning that you were going to have to do just to do normal order of business. Say nothing and getting actually aggressive in free agency. You just needed to create that space. So, like you say, they were expected.
Right. So I don't have a lot to say about it other than that. We got probably like 30, 35, maybe even 40 million under the cap. It's not totally clear. Depends on who you ask, depends on what you look at. But the point is we are now well under the cap. And everything seemed like things were going pretty normal. And then yesterday, literally within half an hour of the Lockett release being announced, which is one of the great shames of all this, we got word from many of the top beat reporters in the NFL that DK Metcalf is looking for the door. DK Metcalf wants a trade, and that's about all we know right now for sure. But that's more than enough for us to definitely get our dander up a little bit on. So what was your initial reaction when that announcement was made?
Not too surprised. Seahawks were basically shopping him last week, and the reports that leaked out, and that you're going to, for every action, there's a reaction. And if you have DK looking at wanting to get a new contract extension, and I can see how it plays out where they leak that out, and then probably for the first time actually meet with him this week, and then he finds out that they don't want to give him basically the contract that he's wanting, or there's a big gulf between the two of them, and the combination of those two, I would say, would be enough to drive a player to then ask for a trade.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's not terribly surprising. It does make some things a little more concrete, because I'm sure that, you've seen the stuff over the last couple of weeks about DK Metcalf, where Corbin Smith was saying there was some stuff going on, and then you had other people saying, no, nothing's going on. This is all being made up. And now you get legitimacy to it, and you kind of realize, okay, I guess Corbin had the right beat on this one.
Yeah, I didn't understand why people gave Corbin such a hard time, and I think it's actually a little bit of a representatory item that you get sometimes within the fan base on this, where people are just trying to, just have sometimes discussions and talks. And in his case, he was well sourced on it. There was the Packer reporter, this SI reporter for the Packers also said he was hearing from his sources on this. And I just didn't quite understand it. When has Corbin come back around and ever given stuff falsely? When has he ever presented a story that's proven to be just untrue? And that's the part where I understand people have the reaction, I want to see Geno there. But quite honestly, I sometimes get this similar sort of reaction getting onto sometimes tough topics. And there's just sometimes a time where the fan base will just almost revolt against it. And it's like, look, it's, as Corbin said, I'm just doing my job, man. I'm just doing what I'm here to do, and boy, he got run through the ringer on it, but I think he was sourced on it. I think the Hawks wanted to have it leaked out. They could very well have even been trying to kind of push the situation with DK where they knew how DK was going to react to it. But I don't, it's not surprising.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I am a little bit surprised this is happening right now, though. And by the way, sorry, I'm just letting my dog out the back
You're
door.
good.
I am a little bit surprised it's happening now, though. This might have been more useful if it happened a couple of weeks ago. Do you read anything into this announcement coming down like immediately after the Lockett announcement, or do you think that's just coincidence?
I think it's kind of coincidental. I mean, it could be a minor thing there where, there's like a little bit of a, the symbolic or whatever. But I think it's more of those first two attributes where what you were trying to do was you were actively dangling him last week. And that's not going to work well for a player. And then I think we had heard John say last week in his 710 interview that they had yet to sit down with Geno. And that tells you that they had yet to sit down with DK. Because they're not going to do the DK negotiations before they do the Geno stuff. And so that then means that, at that point, you're getting probably the first offer to DK then this week. And I'm guessing that's where that gulf kind of came in at that point. And it just, the timing of it aligned up to when Tyler was getting released. But I don't think it's necessarily something like you're disloyal to Tyler, so I'm no longer need to be loyal to you, which would be a bit what we've been inferring there.
Right. I've spent some time talking about that. It is very unfortunate that it played out that way. I will say, regardless of why, it is too bad that we immediately forgot about the whole Lockett element here because of the DK part coming in, which was far more surprising and also far more. It's far more interactive, right? Lockett's just gone. That's all there is to it. There's not much to say about it. But DK, there's still a lot that can happen here. So you're kind of forced to confront that with a lot more energy.
Yeah, it would have been nice to be able to, yesterday doing a live show, to really be able to just be celebrating Tyler Lockett's career and what he did here and how good a player he was. And that part's unfortunate that we're not able to do that. But I don't think there's any ill will from DK's people. They know they've got to get this situation kick-started quick because you need to have a trade facilitated before the start of free agency. You don't want to try to move the trade after everybody's already started to spend their money, because whoever trades for DK Metcalf has to give him a contract extension. So if you wait into free agency on this, if the timeline isn't really pushing along on this one, it hinders both probably player and team.
Right. So with all that being said, so let's think about the possibility of a trade. And I do want to say a trade remains still a possibility. There's a long list of players in NFL history that have requested a trade as contract negotiation leverage. So that could still be in play here. Nothing set in stone yet. But what are you thinking about in terms of potential compensation? What are you thinking about in terms of a destination? Like what's going through your mind?
Well, I think you're going to be quasi-restricted a little bit on the teams you can send him to. Obviously, people were bringing up in my chat last night, Cleveland, and you're not going to be able to make that kind of move happen. And DK is not going to go there and sign a contract extension. And while DK doesn't have a no trade clause, whatever team trades for DK is going to want him to sign an extension, which means he's got to sign up with wanting to go there. People mentioned the Patriots. He just said in an interview a couple of weeks ago that he doesn't want to go to the Patriots. So there may be a little bit more of a limit there on the list of places he can go. My suspicions on this are, Brendan, that he should get back the first and third round pick that we're hearing the Seahawks are looking to get him back in return for him. That tends to be around the going rate for a receiver like DK Metcalf. And I especially combo it up. Interesting to hear your thoughts on this, but I comboed up with the fact that the free agent wide receiver market is really weak and that the draft class is not the strongest. There's a lot of slot guys in this class from a wide receiver standpoint, not as many outside guys. So that to me would only more assured get you the cost that you're hoping to get for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm on that first and third or first and intriguing wide receiver. That's kind of where I am. One of those two, it just depends on what the team is. Like if you could go to a team like the, just as an example, the, people are talking about the Packers, where maybe you could do their first and Romeo Dobbs or their first and what's the name of the other receiver? Dontavian Wicks.
Yeah. I don't really like those deals as much, to be honest with you, because you're getting these guys in. It's like getting Michael Mayer when they bring that up with the Raiders thing, which I understand that these are interesting players and they could be fits to what we need to a degree, but they're also guys on really short club control. So you're getting them as like a 1-year rental before they're going to get to free agency, and you got to decide on paying them, money, which I don't know if I like that on this first. I really would like to just get the draft capital back. Some of it's dependent upon the direction the team's going to take as far as how aggressive they're really looking to get in 2025 at this point if you're moving DK. But I'm not a big fan of getting the player included, especially a receiver, because you're just kind of getting a guy at receiver to me, really. You're not getting a difference maker, and it's then reducing down the returns you get for DK.
What if it would be like for a first-round receiver previously that is disappointed a little, like a Rashad Bateman or a Quentin Johnston? Does that change your perspective at all?
No. Because they're not good receivers. That's why the team's moving them. I mean, if they're good receivers, the team wouldn't be on the lookout to be offloading them, right? And so, Rashad Bateman's case, he's never realized his potential. And I think that it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense outside of you think you're going to be a contender, and this is the way that you're going to fill out your wide receiver core to make them at least somewhat stable, I suppose. But even then, I just go, yeah, you're not going to the Super Bowl with Dontavian, Wicks, and JSN as your receivers and some rookie that you draft in the 3rd round. Like, that doesn't move the needle for me at all. So if that's the case, then I'd rather just give me the draft picks. I'd rather a receiver in the 3rd round rather than giving up that 3rd round for Dobbs or Wicks. I like the receiving talent in this 3rd round better than I like those particular 2 receivers.
Okay, one more, Keon Coleman.
No, because Keon Coleman was a guy that we weren't really particularly big on coming out. There were some really advanced analytic stats, and we were discussing it last year with him about creating separation, how much of his game was relying on contested catches, how unable he was to convert those contested catch situations on a consistent basis. He got like a high volume of them thrown to him, but he wasn't necessarily reeling them in. Versus we got a guy in this draft, I think, that's like Savion Williams is a 90% contested catcher in this draft, to put that in, like perspective a bit. So it's a little like that skill's not going to improve with him. He's not going to create separation more now. So it's like, it's again, kind of, I didn't think it was a good pick for the Bills at the time, and I certainly wouldn't want him here now.
Yeah, I'm not a big Keon Coleman fan. The only other one I could think of is Jalen Polk, if you traded him to New England, which again sounds like it's off the table. That would be a little more fun because I like Polk a lot.
I do like Polk. Yeah, I think Polk's a good player, and he could be an interesting addition in on this. So I would maybe be a little bit more with that, because that's not as much of him a failure or I didn't like him as a prospect. That's as much of just you had Jacoby Brissett, the quarterback, the majority of the season, and
yeah, no offensive line.
No offensive line, and his team was in a way. So
right,
he could be interesting. I still want to get that 1st round pick back, and that's where it gets hard with New England if you did that, because they have such a high 1st round pick, they wouldn't want to give that. But then that's also where I'm open to this being a future 1st round pick. It doesn't have to be in this draft. I'm totally open to it being 2026.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting the New England 2nd round pick is very high, so it's almost a 1st round pick, and you could always find other ways to make up the lost value pretty easily.
I think too, even if it doesn't get the 1st and the 3rd, it's going to be basically a 2nd and a 3rd. So it really comes down to the baseline here is the equivalency is a Jimmy Johnson 1st round pick on his chart, essentially is what you will get for DK. Is it the exact 1st? Maybe, maybe not, but it will be at least an equivalency to that.
Right. So if you cannot get that return back, if things break out in such a way where the value isn't there, because not that what these people think really matters that much, but there are a lot of people on the outside who seem to think DK is only worth a 3rd round pick. Now, I think that's silly, but if the return is not there the way we're talking about, how do you play this? Do you get into a game of chicken with DK? Do you just bite the bullet and move him anyway? What's your thinking here?
Yeah, I wouldn't just give away DK at this point, in my opinion. If it's down to getting only a 3rd round pick back in return, I would play him out his final season and force him to play out his final season. I don't. The whole point of taking away holdouts, and you're on a contract and you've signed this contract extension. No, it's not your draft pick contract that you were brought in the league and you've been forced onto. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that player who says, no, I need to be gone by this point. You play out the final year of your deal. And if he wants to sit out some games to do that and get fined for that, and we can save money on our cap if he wants to sit out, then fine. But I don't want to just give him away for the sake of giving him away. That doesn't seem to me to be a smart team conceptually. And even if you can't get that deal right now, Brendan, right, holding on to him, maybe you could go get that deal at the trade deadline if he's still so insistent upon it.
Right. And also, we have the franchise tag to use next year if we want to use that as some kind of negotiation leverage to motivate something to happen. Maybe he'd be a little more amenable to getting traded to some place like New England. Maybe he'd be more amenable to even a place like Green Bay, which I theorized before. There's no way DK wants to spend half of his life in Green Bay. Like, I think he'd be miserable there. Ask Damian Lillard about that.
I don't think that there was anything real. I think the reporting on the trade was real. And I think that both the Packers and the Seahawks organization leaked the fact that this trade offer was presented out there. I think that what they were doing was kind of a public relations thing here, Brendan, where the Packers, who have their fan base trying to push for them to go out there and make a big move this offseason, can say, hey, look, we made a run at DK Metcalf. See, we had an offer out there for him and they turned us down. And Seattle can start to generate the interest that's possibly out there for DK, because now all these teams here, Green Bay made an offer. Well, maybe we can make an offer. We can do better than that. And so I think that there was a little bit of John and Green Bay being done, Green Bay doing John a solid, John doing Green Bay a solid a little bit on this one to kind of start this ball rolling a little bit.
Yeah. And I don't know if he'd want to go to Buffalo either. That doesn't seem like a very DK type of location. I think he'd be more of an LA, Las Vegas, maybe a place like Kansas City, but even that's thin. I don't know. I feel like that stuff matters to him.
I do too. I think the Vegas one makes a lot of sense on this. And can you find a creative package here where you even, put some stuff together that, Carroll's got a guy or two that you don't think are going to be a part of the long-term here that you can build into with it to get the maximum returns back. That seems to be the spot that would make a lot of sense, especially with Carroll indicating that he wants to be aggressive there and he's not looking to take his time.
Yeah. One thing I would say though, is that he's not the GM in Vegas. That's Spike.
He's basically the GM. It's Tom Brady is the guy that would. It's a first time in GM if I'm not mistaken, and this is a guy that's going to do a lot of what Carroll's going to want to have done in the background. It's very similar to the Schneider-like situation in my read on it.
I don't know. I wonder what happens if Carroll decides he just wants to go all in right now, because I think that's a terrible idea for that team. They're not in any position to go all in, but I know he wants to. I know he wants to, but it's a horrible idea.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you in that right now they're not in a position to really be trying to put the pedal down to the metal. But the contract extension with Max Crosby gives you an indication of what they're trying to do here, right? Because if you're doing what a typical new coach would do coming in there and understanding we're not going to be good by the time the Max Crosby is going to still be in his prime, offload these assets while we can, get him to a winner, and let's kick this rebuild off. That's what you do if you're going to slow build it up. But that's not what they've done here. And they're pushing on for Sam Darnold. They were in on the Matt Stafford trade to the 25th hour, trying to bring him in there. So all indications on this situation are that they're trying to get this going fast. And that's not a typical general manager approach to this, right? That general manager would typically come in new on this and want to take an assessment like they did here with John Schneider and Carroll. First year was an assessment. It wasn't really clearing house. They cleared house into the second year. But instead with the Raiders, you're hearing them say, we're going to go for it. We want to be aggressive right now. And it matches to Carroll, doesn't it, Brendan? Because he is a guy that's an older coach. He doesn't feel like probably he's got as much time to sort of sit around and wait for this thing to slowly develop. Yeah.
I think it's going to be a disaster, though. I think that if he wanted to go now, he should have gone to Dallas, honestly. Like, Dallas is a team that's ready to go now. The Raiders, to me, are the last team that needs to be slamming the gas.
I don't disagree with you, man. I don't. You got two very highly competitive guys in there in Brady and Carroll, and I don't think that it's going to be in their DNA to just sort of, take a chill pill on this one. And quite frankly, I just feel like it's, even as we watch our Seahawks and other teams in the league right now, it's just like these teams are just so hesitant it seems like to ever try to just take that step back and properly build things right. It's wild to watch all these teams constantly in scramble mode in their team building process, as opposed to trying to have some foresight for the situation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So just one last thing about the Metcalf stuff. I think we covered most of it pretty well. I guess the only other thing that I would put out there is the possibility that no trade comes together and we get back to some kind of extension. This is kind of what happened to Ayuk last year. Ayuk indicated pretty strongly he wanted out, and then something got done. Monetarily, I did read one thing earlier today. I think it was from Rossini on ESPN that Metcalf was looking for about $30 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love giving him $30 million a year, but I don't think that's a terrible idea. So I would not mind coming back to that personally. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's probably a 75-25 that he goes to stay. I think that if you are only going to get what Diana Rossini is saying is the third round pick is the compensation back, I think that opens more of the door open to the Seahawks coming back and just making their peace with paying $30 million a year. And that they go, look, we're not getting anywhere near enough returns back on this. This is the way we got to do this instead. And it could go that way. You're right. I do think, though, if you got 100 situations, if you agree on this, that you have 100 times that we've heard this situation where a player in the NFL says, I want to be traded. It feels to me about like 75 of those 100 times that guy gets moved, and that there is those 25 that there is the guys that do remain.
Yeah. And when this trade first came down, my first thought was he's asking for 35. He's asking for top 3 money, because he's looking at this like it's my turn. Last year it was Justin Jefferson's and CeeDee Lamb's turn. This year it's my turn, rather than I'm barely a top 20 receiver, so I should be looking for something more in that second tier. But it doesn't sound like that's the case, which makes me think this is at least possible. It still works out, but I agree. I pretty much agree with your percentages, I think.
Yeah, I think what has happened here is that Seattle, it's not that they're unwilling to pay the $30 million as much as I think that they just want to try to put the resources in different places. Because the thing that stands out in my mind on this situation is that the Jackson Smith and Jigba does kind of inform this a little bit. Because if you do pay DK Metcalf $30 million a year, you're 1 year out from them paying $32 million a year for Jackson Smith and Jigba. And if that's the case, now you're paying 2 receivers $60 million, and there is no team in the NFL, Brendan, that's paying 2 receivers $30 million a season at the same time. This is for a team that's defensively driven, that wants to run the ball. Is that smart conceptually from a team building process to go that route? I think this is really as much as anything that's driving it, more than it's a deficiency in DK's game or that he's not worth the money. I think it's that's kind of hanging up over the organization's head a little bit on this one that makes them a bit unsure, or at least wanting to see, hey, instead, if we can get the first and third round pick on the other side of that, save the $30 million, maybe that's a better way, team conceptually wise, to build this up, that we can build a stronger overall team going that route instead.
Right. I agree with that, because, I'm not in love with the idea of giving DK 30 million, but that's kind of what I expected it was about going to be. And I had made my peace with that. If it was more than that, I was going to kind of draw a line in the sand. But I'm a little bit surprised if they're at 30 million a year and John is saying, no, we need to go lower. I'm a little bit surprised.
Well, that's that. I think that's what, to me, because you're right. 30 million is a reasonable offer on his part. It's the same thing what he did last time, where he asked for 24 after even AJ Brown signed 25, because it'd be realistic for him to come in and say, hey, pay me 33. But coming in at 30 he's being realistic about it. But I just think that's 60. It's going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood like $62 million on your APY for those 2 wide receivers then moving into the future. And that's, again, no team in the NFL doing it, Brendan. These are kind of, it's like when we were paying the 2 safeties at the top of the market. And you go, well, wait, no one else is doing this. We're the only team doing it. You're either brilliant or there's a reason the teams don't do it.
I thought the Eagles were doing it with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Aren't they?
I don't think Devontae's making quite the $30 million a year. I could be off on that, but let me check. Where are we at? The Eagles.
Because AJ got extended not that long ago. I think he's up there.
AJ's up there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So 3 years, $75 million deal. Okay. That he extended. That's not so bad. I mean, he's definitely up there, but it's not quite to that same place. And remembering with the Eagles, they're completely foobarring their cap situation into 2032. So, like with him, he's got void years all the way to 20. I'm not kidding, by the way. Devontae Smith has void years to 2032, literally, on the contract. Mm-hmm. So they're a little unusual too as a team, where they bury the hell out of which it's worked for him, but it's.
Well, I mean, they just won the Super Bowl, and Howie Roseman got a beer thrown at him by an Eagles fan anyway. Imagine what they're going to do when all those void year hits come in.
Oh boy, he better get out of town, because it ain't gonna look pretty. That Jalen Hurts contract is a nightmare later on.
Lane Johnson too. Lane Johnson's a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, it's the void years on it it's. I thought the Niners situation was bad looking at them with their void years, but this Eagles team's got them beat. I mean, I'm looking at just let's go to just 29, for instance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 void year deals in 2029. 11.
That's going to be like one of those years in soccer where the team gets relegated to a lower division. That's
Pretty
what the Eagles
much
do that year.
They may have to do like strike when they bring out like a bunch of dock workers, it might have to be something like that.
Okay, so let's get to these some of these donations real quick. By the way, if you guys have a comment or question that you want addressed, if you send it in the form of a super chat, I'll see it here, and then we will address it. Any donations? So the snail, thank you for the $2. John Schneider needs to go work for the Mariners. Did you hear Justin Turner the other day?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad that
I've
the players
never heard any player talk like that about any team before. Ever.
They've gone beyond the pale. Have the Mariners organization? They've taken this to the point where they've stretched the line as far as they could from the standpoint of the public's perception on this one, and they've taken it beyond that. And it's to the point now where people just outright know this team has no real drive to try to go turn themselves into a contender. That it's to them, it's about their profit and making their profit. And I think that this ownership group needs to get out of town. I think we've had some bad ownership groups, and this ownership group of the Mariners right now is they're not to Ken Behring City yet. They ain't to Howard Schultz City yet, but they're rising with a bullet.
I miss Nintendo.
I do too.
All right, but this super chat, I did definitely want to get to this because this does capture something that bothers me about this whole DK thing. It does feel to me, and I could be wrong, it does feel to me that Schneider got caught with his pants down a little bit here, because I cannot help but feel, and maybe you disagree, maybe there's another perspective here, that restructuring Leonard Williams to the extent that we did, and it was a pretty significant restructure, and then trading DK Metcalf for draft picks are two contradictory actions. One indicates you're all in for 2025. The other indicates that you're taking a step back in 2025. So it cannot help but feel to me like JS thought everything was good. They were going to go for it in 2025. Everything was going to fall in place. So we restructured Leonard Williams, taking on over $14 million in additional cap hits in later years. And then this DK Metcalf trade request just completely blindsides him. Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily. It's hard to say exactly what their approach is going to be this offseason quite yet. I think we'll know in another week, Brendan, of what the approach is going to be on this, specifically down to, are you taking that step back, or are you truly driving forward to be a contender, right? That's the one it remains to be seen exactly the direction they're going to take, especially in light of if they're going to move a DK Metcalf. I think the thing to consider about these restructured deals, remember we did this a couple of years ago, you can roll the money over. So we remember we restructured all those deals, had $11 million, thought we were going to do something at the trade deadline, didn't do something to the trade deadline, then just rolled the money on over. And that's exactly what you can do here. So you create this space to have it if you need it, but if you don't need it, then you just roll it. And the thing with the whole caught with the pants down thing, from my perspective on this, is that you're the one who leaked out the Packer reports. Like that, you actively got that filtered through to Corbin. The Packers organization filtered it through their reporter. It was purposeful. It wasn't by accident. It wasn't something leaking out that nobody wanted to have heard. They wanted it heard. And if you don't think to me that John Schneider, 14, 15 years into this, doesn't understand that if he has a player that's up for a contract extension who hears that he's on the trade market, that's not going to have a good reaction to that player, and that player could very well then come back and request a trade, I think that that's an indictment of John. And I don't think I'm as hard on John as anybody, but I don't think that he's that dumb.
Okay, I feel that. And I thought about that rollover thing as well. My issue is the void years that we added to Leonard Williams. Like, if you were just pushing the cap hit from 2025 to 2026, then that would completely be covered by rollover. But those void year cap hits kind of bug me now, because it's 4.1 million in 2020. No, it's 4.7 million in 2026, and then another 4.7 in 2027. I don't feel like you do that if you know your star wide receiver is about to ask out. I just don't.
The money can keep rolling. So money into 2027, if you don't use it in 26, you can roll into 27. You don't use it in 25 to 26 to 26 to 27. So the money can keep rolling. You're just giving yourself flexibility of the money you can use if you want to use it. You have yourself in a position, if something becomes available to sign, you can sign it. but you can roll it over. And again, the proof back to this is that he's taken this approach before where he's created the money, he's voided years out and then rolled the money over. So he's literally taken this approach once before. I don't think that there's anything lost. You don't lose the money. You don't have to spend the money. It's one that just gives you the deal. And again, I can't buy the fact that he's getting shocked here when you leaked out that you wanted to trade this player, Brendan. Do you think that he thought that he was really going to have that leak out and that DK was just going to, knowing DK, that he was just going to be like, oh yeah, okay. That's not how players react, man. I mean, I think he tacitly kind of wanted to see if DK would push what DK pushed. In fact, I'd go the opposite way direction with it. I'd say that he knew what he was pushing here. I think he knew the outcome of what this would drive towards, and that he kind of wanted that outcome. I think what he kind of wants is a first and a third round pick rather than spending $30 million. I don't think he wants to get a third round pick back for him, but I think that he does kind of want that. And I think that he had this plan in place for a bit of time coming into this offseason.
Do you think Kubiak knew this was likely to happen when he signed here? I don't think he's thrilled with this necessarily. I don't think he's in love with this.
I don't think that I have had it brought up to me as well. I don't think that the OC's opinion matters a whole hell of a lot on this one. And I think that when you're having the interview with Clint Kubiak at the time, you're walking him through all of what's happening. We'd like to keep DK Metcalf. We're coming up to a contract extension with him here. It's going to be $30 million. We don't know if we really want to be spending that. So even if we don't have DK, we will get an able-bodied replacement here for you, Clint. But definitely, we just want you to be aware of that process. Okay, I'm aware of that process. Done. Right? I don't think Clint Kubiak comes to the Seahawks as a forefront decision because DK's here and that's what pulled me to come here. What's going to pull him to come here is the coaching staff, the organization, how they run their business. It's more about the fundamentals than it is about individual parts and pieces.
Okay. Hopefully that's true. Hopefully he's not pissed off now that his receiver is gone and he was planning all of his plans around him. Hopefully you're right.
Can you think of any situation that's ever happened with an OC or a DC?
Not off the top of my head, no, but that doesn't mean it can't happen.
No, but as I always say, we don't count on anomalies or worry about anomalies, right? We count on rules of thumbs and things that are the rule of the road.
Let's see here. Wally World, thank you for the $5. I was sad yesterday. Today I'm looking at all the possibilities. Yeah, I would have been sad about this, last year. But the way things went in 2024 with DK did kind of frustrate me to the point where I'm more open to this than I've ever been before. So now I'm just, kind of going through it. Now I'm just kind of like, all right, this is what may happen now.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. DK's been one of my favorite players on this team, and I don't want to see him go necessarily, but I can understand where Seattle's at in a bit of a pickle here in having to sign this contract, where the team's at, how much money they've got to spend. I think it all kind of comes into account a little bit on this one. And I'm really I find myself in doing this right now, Brendan, this offseason, and I don't know if you're in the same place, but I just find myself at this point saying no sacred cows. It's about getting to a contending team. And what does that take? I love this player. I like this guy. I want this other. What does it take to get to a contending state? That's the sole focus and goal right now, and whatever it takes. Not, well, it's got to be this with this guy and this guy and this guy. That's the way this has got to happen. No, what does it take? And then that includes if we got to take the step back for this year. I'm open to it. The sole thing for me needs to be, how do we get to that contending state? Is it not for you?
Yeah, it is. Of course, not everybody's going to agree exactly how we get there. That's the hard part of this, right? Like, we all want that, I'm sure. I think 100% of Seahawks fans want that. It's just hard to figure out how we get there.
I think 100% of Seahawks fans do want that, but I do also think that there's sometimes the contingency in the fan base that gets more to the players, and it becomes more about kind of the player than it becomes about the team. And that's a transition I've seen in recent years here and kind of covering this team, where I don't always understand that. And I think that there is a little bit of a contingent at times and that will make a bit more of that choice too. It's that there's more of a gravitation to the player than the team on this. And that's,
I would hope that the people like that do genuinely believe that the player is so good that player is a path to contending. Having that player is important to contending. I would certainly hope that. Maybe they're wrong. Like, in some cases, they're very wrong. But I assume that they're at least working from that intent.
Well, it's like, how many people did you hear in your chat that want to bring back Tyler Lockett? I know you've heard from him. I've heard from a variety in mine that want to bring him back. I mean, Tyler's been done, right? Like, he's not a fit for this offense, but they will still bang the drum hard to, why don't we bring Tyler back? Bring him on a low-end contract. Have him back as like a mascot leader type. Like, that's not a contending team kind of mentality. That's I love this player. I want to have my mascot mentality. And that's where I think we got to be more, not we don't have to, but it's just my outlook on it is more into the just, I'm looking to what we need to do team centric wise. And that's the sole focus.
Yeah. I think some people think Lockett is still really good. I think they're wrong. I think they're very wrong. I think some people think Lockett is still a really good player. And that's where it comes from.
I've had people mention me. I know he's not the same player. I know he's not the same this, but I just want to have him back. I mean, in doing my shows live, man, I hear a lot of this type of stuff, and I've heard a lot of that where it's just, I just want to have him back. I know he's not as fat. I know he doesn't give any yak. I know he's not a blocker. I just want to have him back. And there's a little bit of that sentimental stuff that exists here at play that to me is only a thing that's inhibiting in building the winner. If that's something that we're having it at all at the forefront of our mind. I don't think the organization is, but at the same point in time, I think you could have made an argument Lockett probably shouldn't have even been here through last year with where his cap hit was at, but the team kind of did that mascot thing and kept him on for an extra year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that. I've wondered certain Seahawks fans if they, are not so much Seahawks fans as they are groupies for a particular player. I've wondered that myself a little bit, but for the most part, I think people just think that these players are better than they are in some cases, or worse than they are, or whatever. I think we just have different approaches to this.
Agreed. And I don't want it to seem like I'm hammering them too much because it is a good instinct that they're operating from, in that you want them to celebrate the players, revere the players, love the players. That's what fans do. But it just shouldn't come at the cost of understanding that this team for 10 years has done nothing. And in my opinion, nobody on this team deserves to be like, they've got to stay here when that's been your track record. That's it. It's 10 years of this. And it doesn't mean that it's their fault at all. It just means that this dynamic has not worked. This interrelation of parts has not been able to present a contender or even anything close to a contender. So we got to kind of flip the script here, upend the table, change the process a bit, shake things up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the most part, though, I give these people the benefit of the doubt that maybe they just believe something that I really, really don't.
Yeah, it's definitely could be that too. Absolutely. It's not, and again, it's a very small. I think most of the Seahawks fans are very, very smart and understand. As I was talking to them yesterday, people were very even keeled and you're not too emotional about this, which is what I was kind of more expecting, where they could, like you on this, kind of understand that this is where the process is played out to.
Yeah, it's in some ways it is good timing because DK, I think, has gotten to the point where a lot of people are fed up with him, not for the reasons that I think are silly. Like some people are like, oh, he drops too many passes, when really his drop rate is not particularly high, radically high compared to other good receivers. It's just more of the, it's that thing where we just had this season where we had an offensive coordinator who thought it was illegal to run the ball and he still couldn't get to 1,000 yards. That bugs me. Like, it would be one thing if he can't get to 1,000 yards with a run first OC, like somebody who just wants to run the ball all the time, but for him to do what he did last year, where he was basically a ghost after the injury, after he came back from the injury, like that did, I think, get a lot of people to the point where they're like, okay, whatever happens, I don't really care anymore.
Yeah, I probably should have just not played. If the injury was reducing him down as a player as much as it appears it was, probably shouldn't have just played, because I think that in retrospect, he just was not the same guy out there and moving around. But it's a lot of things there with DK. It's a complicated story. It's the penalties. I was looking at his penalties. The guy's going to finish his career off with nearly 100 penalties in his career that he's on pace for. I can't imagine that's not going to be the most all time for a wide receiver in NFL history. So it's no small thing either on those kind of things.
Yeah. I did wonder if part of this is that he wants to be coached by a coach who will let him get away with that a little more, because McDonald doesn't seem like he does. Like maybe he wants to get coached by a Carroll who will just let that stuff go, because McDonald doesn't. I wonder if that's an element here.
I think if they came in and they paid the $30 million off the rip, he takes the $30 million off the rip. I think that they came in and lowballed him a little bit on the offer, and so he's reacting accordingly to it with the trade stuff. But it is a guess. It's a complete guess for sure.
Seahawks OG, thank you for the $9.99. Great to see you back, guys. My deal would be DK, Reek, and Fant to Pete /Vegas for Bowers plus their second rounder. Thoughts? I think you're drawing dead on getting Bowers away from the Raiders for any amount of capital.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they give him up for anything in the world right now. Although Pete isn't a big tight end guy, I guess. I still can't see it. He's too good.
Yeah, the Raiders are going to have to eat a bunch of dead money to move Bowers because he's a first round contract who's only into his second year. So all the bonus money comes flying off of that. Number one, that makes it not likely to happen. Number two, they like them as a player. They don't want to let him go. They're trying to go and make a move for DK. It's not to rob from Peter to pay Paul. It's to add on to what you have because you're trying to get this team into a place of contention quick and fast. And so you don't want to lose Bowers. You want Bowers and DK on the field at the same time with that. So he would be off the board on that one. Would be Bowers on this. Obviously, if they were open to doing it, I'd be open to doing it. But I don't think that that's what the Bears are. They're not going to let him go.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a package that could get number 6 from the Raiders. Keeping in mind that Pete probably really likes these guys because they're his guys. I wonder, like, if you could do DK, maybe some combination of DK, Woolen, and Geno. I wonder if you could cook it up.
I thought the same thing. I mean, that's the 3 guys that you just mentioned, I think would be a fair kind of compensation point on that number 6 pick. They get their quarterback. You get a number 1 wide receiver and you get a number 1 cornerback for your 6th overall pick. I think that the Raiders could sell that to their fan base. I know Geno's not going to get anybody super excited, but some of this also is they lose out on Stafford. They're probably going to lose out on getting to Darnold. And then that kind of does leave Geno as the next sort of bell at the ball up to be the next best guy. If they're looking, and the drive is from the Raiders standpoint, which it does seem, to try to be that team that can go out there and be a playoff contender in year 1 under Pete. And it makes a lot of sense to go that route with it on this one, Brendan, if they're open to it. And then just depends on if the Raiders are open to it, of course.
Yeah, I would hate to roll over for 2025, which is basically what you're doing in that scenario, but I think I have to do it. Like, it's too good.
You know my standpoint. We talked about this before we were heading in the offseason, and I know it's not a popular one. To your point on this, Brendan, is I've definitely got my share of pushback for it as well, and I get it. I get the pushback on this. I'm not sensitive to it as far as I just understand it's people are kind of ready for this team to win. It's been 10 years, so I get that. But I have been a proponent of taking this step back this year, and these kind of moves would be emblematic of that. And I think that they would be smart, and that we'd be much healthier organizationally wise, setting the stage here for McDonald. We'd have the resources in the right place, I think, from where we're putting them. And it more is an alignment to me. The vision is an alignment. That's you're less reactionary to everything. There's a little bit more of we've got an approach here that we're actually applying here, and it's going to require a little more patience. But I think that with that patience is the returns are going to be so much better than because of it.
But yeah, I think you could. I think the general point of the super chat is there could be something pretty fun you could cook up with the Raiders here.
Yeah,
that would be the team you could really kind of take advantage of because these are Pete's guys and he loves them and he's desperate to compete now at any cost. If there's a team to fleece, that's the team.
100%, especially knowing that drive is in them right now, and Pete to not be patient. You're sort of able also to kind of take advantage of that lack of patience that they probably should have there right now, and instead be able to go, okay, hey, we'll give you that you've got, those big eyes for next season. We'll help you. We'll lean into that and help you out with that. And Seahawks then, I mean, at that point, yeah, there's a lot of work that has to be done then to get the team going. But man, you've got, for raw assets standpoint, you're in phenomenal shape to get that done.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $1.99. Would DK trade is Fant not a cap casualty? A lot of people that I've been listening to lately have said that Fant's not a cap casualty no matter what. Like, apparently Kubiak likes him and we're keeping him. So that's what I'm hearing.
It's possible. I think you would have let him go here the last week if the intention was really to go and do that. I don't think they're going to wait through this process and get like into the wave tier 3 of free agency and then release Noah at that point. It does kind of seem like the intention here is to keep him retained in house. So I guess that is the case with it, that he is gonna remain. Now I think with the DK trade, it just only means that he's more likely to stay. I think with a DK trade would be my guess.
I'm not a huge fan of it, honestly. I have a hard time believing that Noah Fant is worth $13.5 million. I think he's a good player. I just don't think he's worth 13.5. I don't even really think he's worth the $9 million you save. But I also understand there aren't a lot of good tight ends out there. So if you want to run a tight heavy offense, you got to go with it.
Yeah, I'm with you a little bit with this though, because the other part that factors into this, of course, is the draft. And you have probably the deepest tight end draft in the last 20 years. That's not an overstatement. It may be more than that. and that you can go into this draft if you had a purposeful approach to want to do so and grab 2 tight ends, and you're in better shape overall than maybe where you are even with Fan as it stands right now. And so I think this is the year to kind of do it if you're going to do that on letting them go get those tight ends in the draft. But like you say, it does seem like that they're pretty resolved to just keeping him.
Right. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't think Fant's a bad player either. So I get it. I'm sure Kubiak's got plans. And look, Fant is still like a legitimate move tight end. He's still a legitimate tight end 1. He's just not a top 10 tight end or anything like that.
Agreed. Yeah, he's fine. He's definitely workable. I mean, the blocking isn't as great, but as pass catcher, he'll definitely work in this system.
Mm-hmm. Seth, thank you for the $4.99. If DK does get traded, do you now consider this a rebuild phase, or do you think we could still make the right moves this offseason to be a contender? Yeah, this is something that I've thought about a lot lately. Very complex.
Well, yeah, real complex. I think that there's 2 different directions that they could go here. So it doesn't give you a great answer on that, Seth, and that it can go either or. I can give you what would be my direction of it, and that is if DK's moved, then I think Geno Smith should be moved in conjunction with that. I don't think that you move DK and then you hold on to Geno and try to contend next year. Yes, the flip side of this is, yes, you could still create a contender that way. You save the money on DK's new deal. You got the draft capital. You sign a Drew Dahlman. You sign a Tevin Jenkins. You sign a Geno Smith. You trade for a Rashid Shaheed. You draft a guy in the 3rd round at the wide receiver position to round out the wide receiver core. And then boom, here you go. Could that team go out there and be a contender in that way? They could. It's not out of whack that could be up. And some of this is a bit of the offloading of the resources from one to the other. You pull from receiver and Lockett and DK, and you push it over and more into the offensive line. Very possible. But I would tend to think that if I'm going to move DK, I just move Geno, because the whole point of signing Geno was that you're a contender in 25, and now you're less knowledgeable about that if you move DK. You're not a stronger team having moved DK, even if you do offload assets.
Yeah, if we move DK, if that does indeed happen, I do think you need to reopen yourself up to the possibility, at the very least, of doing the rebuild. I think that if you do that, the degree of difficulty is gone up. And the thing is, if you're going to go that route, the rebuild route, or not rebuild, it's not really a rebuild. It's more of a retooling, right? You're not getting rid of like Cross or JSN or anybody like that. It is just kind of purging some of the old stuff a little bit. I mean, Schneider would have to have full confidence that Jody is not going to fire him no matter what happens, right? John Schneider would have to believe I have freedom and time to do this. Assuming you get that, I do think that's probably the best way to go. I don't think it's impossible to try to put together an offseason plan that gets you to a good state this season. And I'm going to be at least open to the possibility, but it's going to require us to do things we have never done before. It's going to require spending a lot of money in free agency. It's going to require hitting on probably 75% of our draft picks. And that's a lot of pressure. So I do kind of lean the other way at this point, admittedly. And look, I'm somebody who is a big Geno Smith fan. I think he's one of the 8 best quarterbacks in the league. I think he is a fantastic quarterback. I'm very happy with him, but this thing may not come together in quite the way that we need it to make this work with him. So it is what it is.
Timing's just kind of off on it. It's not represents like DK and Geno. It's sort of both situations are sort of separated from how good they are as a player. It's timing, it's cost, it's where the team's at. It's all of that together a little bit on this situation, which is weird because usually it is just about the player, how good they are, do they deserve the contract? It's usually just as straightforward as that. But there's a little bit more moving parts to me in this deal.
Yeah, and I guess the alternative would be to just keep Geno on his deal, let him play it out, and then figure things out next season based on how the season goes. You would just avoid the extension for now. You could just let Sam Howell go with the season. There are other ways to do it for sure, but I do kind of lean that way. Not because DK's a great receiver, an amazing receiver, or anything like that. It just increases the degree of difficulty that you now have to replace him in one offseason.
Yep. It opens a major hole. That's a hard hole to fill. And that's on top of already the holes you do have to fill with somewhat of the finite amount of resources you have at your disposal to get it done. And it's like you say, it can be done, but it's just a thin, narrow doorway to try to walk through.
Right. Let's see here. Dylan Sosa, thank you for the 19.99. Hot take, trade DK to Packers for Dobbs and the 23, then trade 23 Derek Hall and a future first or second for Parsons, and then you still have 18 to draft a star, especially if our identity is going to be to run the ball. We'll miss him, though. I don't think Dallas would do that. I think you need a little more than that to get him from Dallas. I'm not sure, but that seems.
I think that's about right. I think that's about right. I mean, that's two. You're giving him 2 first, you're giving him a second, and you're giving him Hall. That's about what you could expect to get for Parsons.
Where's the second? It's
first or second. Sorry, just a first. So I still think that's enough. 2 firsts and a Hall is like 2 firsts and a second round pick, basically. That's about what you're going to get for an edge rusher like Parsons.
I don't know what to think of Hall right now. I think he might be like a better version of Darrell Taylor. He's so bad against the run.
He is. I think he's definitely a different player than Darrell, but I think to your point that you're touching on is he's okay to solid, but there's room there for you to improve that. And I think that when we talk about a Garrett or Micah Parsons, this defense adding a kind of player like that can be a real true difference maker off the edge would be huge, I think, and would be a monstrous addition if you could add that. And so I'm open to the Parsons thing. I do think with Parsons, the thing to consider with it is as monstrous as he is as a pass rusher, the guy does not play the run in the same way of a guy like Myles Garrett and how he plays the run off the edge. And that while there's no doubting what he is as a pass rusher, when you're talking about making this sort of, well, no, he should be worth 3 first-round picks, it's like, there is a little hole here to the game on this one. So it ain't just pure like the guy's just amazing and walks on water kind of player. There is some stuff there too in addition on this. On top of the fact you do have to pay him a monster contract if you do trade for Parsons. He's going to want $35 million per year.
Right. I don't know. Thinking about what Jerry Jones prioritizes, I don't think he would see the value in that. I think he's content just trying to make the playoffs every year. And I think the trading Parsons is something you do if you're trying to take a step back so you can take 2 steps forward later. Jerry Jones does not take steps back. He does not believe in that. So
I agree with you on that. The one part of this that could factor into this is the contract negotiations with Parsons. Because what Jerry Jones does with his players is he stretches them out and he tries to not pay them until basically the 11th hour on the contract negotiations. It went this way with CeeDee Lamb. It went this way with Dak Prescott. It's been a variety of guys in recent years that's been this way. And Parsons has already started to mention, hey, I want to get this thing done now. And if Jerry's going to push him on that, does Jerry want to risk a potential situation like with DK where he's like, look, they're not paying me. I'm requesting a trade. Or do you, from a Jerry standpoint, get ahead of that a little bit? And it's just something to monitor and track. But I think that's the part. There's the point where there's the fly in the ointment on this, Brendan, where Parsons knows the Cowboys game. He knows what they're trying to do here, and he doesn't want to play that game. He wants to get paid now. He don't want to wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, though, if he comes to Seattle, no more podcasting. He cancels the podcast immediately. I can't have it.
I would hope so.
Yeah, no more podcast. I listened to it once. It's really bad. We don't need that.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see here. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. This offseason escalated quickly. And also BTW off is the direction all California teams can F, and something feels off with JS. Okay, so I guess the JS part of this comment would be the one thing that's like, something that can be talked about. That's one thing that I'm not in love with about the whole idea of taking a step back. I don't want to reset the clock for Schneider that much because I'm kind of getting sick of him, and I don't want to give him like 2 or 3 years of free time to figure this out. But maybe that's just the way things have to be. But I'm not I'm losing faith in Schneider at this point. I'll say that.
I think it's fair to not necessarily have as much faith in John. I think I would just offer this to you on the step back thing. And that is that this organization, you just mentioned Jerry never takes a step back. We never take a step back. We don't. That's the reality here too. And this is the thing that I think I'm as hot on as anything this offseason, Brendan, being that we constantly get in there, just keep pushing it forward, keep pushing it forward, keep pushing it forward. And it hasn't worked. So we're gonna try essentially walk in this offseason the same approach we've been operating off of, yet we expect there's going to be different results. Why? Why? If it's failed for 10 years straight taking this approach, why would it not fail next year? And why is it to me, I don't think that there's a matter of you're giving John more or less time. I think Jody's given him the time he's got. He knows what he's got to work with. And understanding that, I think as well, it's awful from an organization's perspective if you're driven as a general manager not to do the right things, not to build it up properly, but that you've got a fear for your job. So that's what's driving your decision making. Look at the Giants right now with a lame duck head coach and a lame duck general manager. They're going to probably make some stupid decisions this offseason because that's their motivation. That's what's driving them. And I don't want to be in that same pickle of it. I want to make intelligence decisions. And I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong on this, Brendan, but I feel like a big thing that stood out this last 10 years, when I look through the trades, when I look through the signings, when I look at how the team spends its money, we're very reactionary. We're very constantly reactionary to what just happened, as opposed to having a vision up ahead of you and saying, here's the plan that we've got in place, and here's how we're going to execute that plan. A, B, C, D, E. Does it feel like to you the last 10 years that's how they've been operating, or does it feel to you like the last 10 years has been more reactive?
Yeah, it's been more reactive. I would say we were going to take a step back when we traded Wilson. We just kind of fell backwards into a franchise quarterback with Geno. And I don't know if that was the plan at the time. You can't tell me that anybody thought that Geno was going to be that good when we traded Wilson. So I would say that was one time where we were at least amenable to doing that. And then things just broke a different way. But other than that, you're right.
Yeah, I think that they didn't necessarily they could have taken a step back there. You're right. They didn't take the step back there that offseason, though. The trade of Russell occurred, and you got younger, and you had a lot of picks, but you didn't necessarily go and say, let's reset this button now. You still were pushing through. And this was also followed up by the comments of your general manager and your coach, by the way. So it's also, in addition to the moves that they made, we're not about still trying to maximize out that today. And they were telling you, yeah, we moved Russell, but we still think we can compete. We believe in Geno Smith. We know he can be good. So the organization didn't take that step back there, even though, like you say, they could have, but they didn't. And that's why I'm so hard on this, is I say, look, you haven't done it for 10 years. Why not take a different approach? You've done the same approach. You've scrambled. You've been reactionary. It hasn't worked. And it's kind of easy to see why, right, Brendan? If you're reactionary and you're constantly scrambling year by year, and there's not that real plan in place, that's probably a team that's not likely to be winning a lot of games versus the team that's got a visionary approach.
Mm-hmm. I always thought that was just kind of Pete blustering personally when he was saying stuff like that.
Well, but again, we go back and we look at the contracts that were given out that year. If we look at the moves that team made, I don't think that we're looking at any of the moves that were made that season, Brendan, and we're saying, oh, this is a reset season. This is a rebuild year. And we can go through it right now and look at those moves that they made that year, that off season. But I don't think that you would think about that in retrospective, looking at it like they made rebuild kind of moves there. They were still driving hard. They didn't get out from under bad contracts at that point and pull it down. They didn't roll money over into the next year, right? That would have been an indicator. Save some money and then roll it into the next year's cap. You didn't do that. You used up all of your cap space that year, didn't you? Every last bit of it. So it's also, they said it, but then it's also backed up by their actions too.
Now, the one deal that really didn't make sense that offseason was the Diggs extension. That was the one that was like, that's not something a rebuilding team would do, that I remember. The Diggs thing was like, okay, he just broke his leg. He just turned 30. Why are we doing this? I remember thinking that. Other than that, what else did we do that offseason? I'm trying to remember.
We go through it. 2022, is that right?
Well, it would have been the 2022 offseason, yeah.
So we've got a lot of the one-year deals handed out again. You retained Disley, Sidney Jones, Al Woods, Quandre Diggs on the free agent signing. You signed Uchenna Nwosu in free agency, which was a pretty large contract given John's track record and what he had signed on that. You signed in Quentin Johnson, Austin Blythe, Artie Burns. And those were the moves on that. But there was a lot of one-year deals, and again, used up all your cap space. You sign a guy like Uchenna Nwosu that year, to me, no, you don't. You don't make that kind of signing in a rebuild year like that. You're clearing money off the books in a year when you're resetting. You're having money that you can roll over into the next year. Now, there's a lot of things you're doing when you're actually hitting this reset button, and there were no indications of that from what the Hawks are doing past just purely moving Russell Wilson. And even that was happening not because they were being visionary, Brendan. That was happening because Russell Wilson requested the trade.
Mm-hmm. And John was sick of him too. I think I think that was more like they didn't believe in him that much anymore, more so than thinking like, let's cash in this big asset that we have. I think they were just kind of sick of him. So you're right. There were some contradictory moves that offseason. I think the Diggs one is the big one that really stands out to me as being like that didn't make sense. But other than that, like Nwosu was still really young when he signed that deal was the thing. So if you liked him, it was conceivable he would be part of the long term.
Yeah, I just think it's a guy you're signing that's in free agency, a sign like that. You're doing it for a team that you think is playoff ready is more of that's an indication of that signing more than it's that we're hitting this reset button and we're going to bring this guy in who's going to be part of that foundation moving into the future. I mean, there's a little bit of a part of that, but again, it's used up all that cap space for a team that was not going to contend that year. That in itself is stupidity, probably. Right. But it's also an indicator of the fact that the team thought they could contend, could compete. Did they think that there was like a great chance of it happening? Maybe not, but they definitely did in their moves indicate that we're not just going to ease off on the gas and just sort of let this thing ride through. We're still going to try to push it through. And the Quandary Diggs that's an awful extension. And it was awful extension at the time. You knew you were rewarding him for past performances more than you were rewarding him for future performance, which the year before, I think you had done something similar with Tyler Lockett, where it's like, really, you're going to put Tyler Lockett on this big deal and you think over the next couple of years, he's going to be at this for 1,000-yard season that you're going to get. I don't know. I think it was a little bit of their men of the moment, a little bit in that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. B-Dog, I do now understand what you were saying about Jalen Hurts. The Eagles cover his weaknesses perfectly. That's what we should do with Gino. Yeah, I don't know which B-Dog he's talking to here, but I've talked a lot about Jalen Hurts over the last month or so. So it might be me. It might be you. I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, it's the Eagles construct their team and their roster in the right way, and they know what Hurts can do and can't do. Hurts is very smart too. He's got to be given a lot of appreciation for understanding his limitations and working around that. And he doesn't fall into the traps and the mistakes. It's really the mistakes he doesn't make at the quarterback position that separates him as much as it is the big time throws he makes and the decision making as far as, layering a ball in a tight window. But the Eagles have built that team right to be able to maximize what he brings to the stage. And that's what you want to do around your quarterback is lean into his strengths and minimize those weaknesses. And you're right. Smart to do the same with Gino if we're going to retain him. Be calm.
Yeah, and there's this kind of partner super chat. I thought you were hating on Hurts and you weren't. You were calling him limitations. Now in his defense, every QB needs help, even Burrow and Mahomes. Yeah, I think this is the part of football that really takes a while for people to understand when they start watching it and trying to actually dissect it. It's like that kind of those last steps you take when you're really trying to understand what you're looking at when you're watching a football game. The thing that I think people need to spend more time thinking about is what is the player being asked to do by the team? Like, just as an example, imagine you have a cornerback who is so good, the team asks him to cover half of the field by himself. He's still going to give up some stuff every now and then because he's covering the entire half of the field by himself, but they're asking him to do that. That means they have a tremendous amount of faith in him and his abilities, and they think he's one of the best in the world versus the cornerback that maybe they're asking very little of. He's going to give up less because they're not asking him to do that much. That doesn't mean he's a better player than the guy who's giving up a little bit more because he's being asked to do more. In the case of the quarterback, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of people this offseason trying to say, oh, Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback now because he won the Super Bowl. I'm sure you've seen that, right?
Sure.
Jalen Hurts' arm is a blunderbuss. You know what a blunderbuss is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his arm is a blunderbuss. He has minimal accuracy beyond 12 yards. He can do the 9 route stuff a little bit. That's pretty good. But other than that, and then you have a player like a Justin Herbert, and now everybody's like, oh, Jalen Hurts is so much better than Justin Herbert. Look at what the team asks of the player. Justin Herbert is constantly pushing the ball down the field, over the middle, fitting the ball into tight windows, constantly being asked to make these high degree of difficulty throws versus somebody like Jalen Hurts. The Eagles almost never ask him to do stuff like that. All they ask him to do is run the ball and do 9 routes and then throw like easy short passes. Look at what they ask of him. compared to these other quarterbacks that are actually elite. Look at what the Bengals asked of Joe Burrow. And yes, look at what the Seahawks asked of Geno Smith last year with Ryan Grubb's offense. He had to make insane high degree of difficulty throws over and over and over again. Jalen Hurts probably went the whole season without having to make as many high degree of difficulty throws as Geno Smith had to make in like a 2-week sequence 4 or 5 different times last year. So that's the part that I think is kind of like the final stage of really trying to really understand what you're seeing on a football field.
Yeah, I think that that's a big part of it. I think if I could offer on top of it, I think supporting cast is a part that we want to probably take into account, especially with the quarterback position on this, and that does factor into this as well. As Hurts has got maybe the best offensive line in pro football. He's got at least a top 15 wide receiver and probably a top 23, top 22 wide receiver. He's got a top probably 6 tight end. He's got maybe the best running back in the sport. Like that's also going to make all the things you said about what he does as far as the responsibilities are true. And then you pair that in addition to that with a supporting cast that's as good as this, with a defense that's good on the other side. And this sets up his success. And that's not then about the greatness of Hurts. It's not to say he doesn't have some good things he brings, but that's not then about the greatness of him. That's not about it of elevating his greatness. That's more about individually recognizing how great those individual parts are, how they all work together so well to elevate him as a player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big part of it as well. The supporting cast, somebody like a Jalen Hurts is pretty much loaded at every position.
Yeah.
And then you have players like Herbert, who, I mean, his receivers are kind of sort of okay, I guess, like the Quentin Johnston thing alone. And they're trying to rebuild the offensive line on the fly with mixed results.
You're right. Johnson's awful. Quentin Johnston's been a bust for them. And he has they took their 2 quarterback receivers away and Michael Johnson or whatever that guy's name is. And then Keenan Allen, they moved on last year. So they pulled down the receiving core bigly. When you look at the playoffs, in this one where people look, this is again where it's wild to watch people watch one game and they take away one thing, and then you can watch another game and you take away something else. I watched that Charger game and I went, wow, that receiving core is awful. It does not surprise me in the least if the Chargers become one of those teams that jumps up here for a DK Metcalf because they're like, we got to get this receiving core into place. Like they were trying to feature Quentin Johnson that game, Brendan. I don't know if you watched it or not, but like he had 5 targets and no catches.
You're talking about which game was that? Not the playoff
game. The Texan playoff game against the Chargers.
It was. Okay.
And so he's got five targets, no catches. Lad McConkey's got like 150. He's the only guy catching it out there. You've got 2, Disley and Johnson, who have 2 plays where the ball hits him in the hands, ricochets off their hands, and then is intercepted. So people go, well, Herbert had this awful game. It's like, well, wait. He's got no skill position to play to throw to. Then when he throws to him, they drop the ball. You got no running game to work off in that game. The running game was awful in that one. What do you expect him to do? The supporting cast matters. You need the help. It can't just be the superhero quarterback thing that people get into with this. It doesn't work that way in the modern NFL. Like B. Calm says, everybody needs some help. Nobody's just going to go out there on high.
Yeah, we just watched Mahomes have one of the worst games by a quarterback in Super Bowl history. I mean, until garbage time. If you can't learn the right lessons from that, you're never going to learn the right lessons from that.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Like maybe not so much this year because the Chargers ran the ball so much this year, but could you imagine putting Jalen Hurts in the Chargers offense last year and asking him to do what Herbert had to do for that team?
They're not getting the playoffs.
Yeah. And could you imagine if Justin Herbert got transplanted into the Eagles offense this year and only had to do what Hurts did? I think they'd win a Super Bowl. Yeah, I think they're winning the Super Bowl with him. I think they'd probably win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy.
I don't know about Purdy. Purdy will be one I wouldn't go there with it, but I think that definitely Herbert. I'd be with you there. And there's a variety of quarterbacks who go in there and win the Super Bowl. To your point,
they're in the mix with Purdy. I think they're in the mix with Tua. They're in the mix with Baker Mayfield. I don't know if they win it with those guys. They're in there.
The thing with Purdy is he's not going to hit those 9 route throws. That's you touched on the part of it. What they're able to do in a lot of simple terms is that you have your running game working so well. You've got to bring that safety down the box to help. Now you have a single high safety on the outside, and you're going to get single coverage somewhere with one of your receivers on the outside. You run the 9, that single high receiver can only go to one side of the field or the other to cover up on those 9 route throws. So then it's basically, if you got a guy to get the 9 route throws on that and put it over the top like Hurts can, and he throws a good 9 ball, that's where now you can keep defenses honest in a very simplistic fashion, right? I force you to cover 2 because I can hit you on the 9 route. You bring the safety up to stop the run, I hit you with that. You keep the safety back, I run all day on you on the front end of it. And football gets real simple, real quick with that. But with Purdy, he doesn't have a 9 route throw. So what teams then do is they bring the extra guy down in the box, and they don't have to worry about the guys on the outside with those kind of throws.
Yeah, Purdy's tough, especially after the arm surgery. His arm is, with all the arm injuries he has, he's going to have like a 12-yard arm before long.
Probably.
Yeah, and word is he's going to get $55 million a year or something. That's I don't envy that. I don't envy that at all.
Niners are maybe not going to pay him either on that. They came in with a $45 million offer off the rip, which is sort of like that. It's a bit like what I think what Seattle did with DK, where it's like your offer in itself is sort of, we don't want to re-sign you almost, and I think that they're trying to set the stage to force him to play on that final year of his contract of his rookie deal because they don't want to sign up for that. And I get why they don't, but they're also kind of peeling money away. Like they're going to move Brandon Ayuk next. He's on his way out the door. They're going to probably move Javon Hargrave. Like they're salary dumping like a mofo.
I think they already announced they're releasing Hargrave for sure. I think they've basically done it. They just can't file it until next week.
But it's not a good saving deal for them. Like because they backloaded that contract so much, when they release him off, they're taking such a hit there where it's not a matter of you saving money to go get a player you can go get. This all looks like pure and simply their owner has come down and said, tighten that belt strap. No more of this freewheeling spending crap.
Yeah. They wanted to trade Ayuk too, and I think it was Shanahan that put his foot down. That does not look good now, does it?
It does not look good. And you start that it doesn't show, again, you look about lack of visionary reactionary. Like if you have a coach coming in and this gets presented, then 2 days later he's pushing it down. It's like, that's a horrible look. And but it may be outside of his control too, because I think some of this is coming down from ownership. We'd heard last year that they were getting fed up with some of the spending processes, and they have a lot of the same stuff that the Eagles have going on with that void year stuff on their contracts. And if you're not winning Super Bowls with all those void years, and now you got a quarterback coming up to be paid $45 to $55 million a year, and you just paid $30 million to this receiver, and maybe you're going to start going, hey, why don't we just spend regularly and see if you can do it that way?
Yeah, don't they eat a ton of debt on Debo already? By the way.
Oh yeah. It's going to eat the Hargrave. That one's going to eat a ton of this space on up, and yeah.
Let's see here. The Snail, thank you for the $2. My issue isn't trading DK; it's the timing and look. I'm not a huge fan of the timing either, but it's not untenable yet. It's not like this team has already completely handcuffed themselves to going 100 miles an hour. They have made a couple of moves that indicate that. It's not too late to bail out, I don't think. It's not ideal, but it's I would have preferred this happened last week. I'll say that much. I would have preferred that it happened last week, but I don't think it's the end of the world on the timing.
No, I mean it's not ideal. I think the nail to my heart on this will be the fact that this gets leaked out last week and that you purposely did it as an organization. And that you knew the reaction that was going to get back from DK. And if this leads you to only getting back like a 3rd and 4th round pick back for DK because of that, it's going to be a real bad look. I don't understand why this couldn't have happened with DK without this ever getting to the press, without DK ever getting to a point of requesting a trade. Why couldn't you start to get this facilitated in the background? Why couldn't you have discussions with DK saying, we will try to make this happen? Why couldn't you find out what the trade value return would be with DK without having to leak the Packers offer? These would be a bit of my questions in my mind on this one that I don't have a good answer for. So it is a little bit of a not great look, Snail, to your point on that, and I would agree with that.
Yeah. Just see the show we're going to have in a couple weeks if we end up trading DK for like a 3rd and a 4th. Just if you want to see us react to that, then just let it happen and then see what happens. It's not going to be pretty.
No, it won't. I'm not going to be happy about it because it will feel like you fumbled this one. You bungled this one.
Yeah. It will feel like you thought everything was cool with DK and then you were blindsided by this, which, like you said, probably should not be the case.
Well, again, it's easy to say if you're blindsided if DK had come out and he just said, I want to be traded yesterday. And it was sort of like just You released Tyler. You hadn't even gotten into contract negotiations with DK, and then this just came out. But the fact that last week you leaked it out, the fact that you started this fire, you dropped the gasoline on the floor, you lit the match, you threw the match, and you did the walk away move, right, where the explosion's going to happen and you're going to walk away. Like you started this fire, man. You Billy Joel'd this thing. So like you got it. You can't be shocked with it then when it comes down to DK reacts to it in that way. I mean, there's got to be a bit of it of you knowing this is the way this is going to play out. I would think, unless John's just a complete moron.
David Pugh, thank you for the $4.99. I want to hear both of y'all's ideal trade spots and the realistic package y'all think you could get from them if y'all don't mind. Thanks, guys. We kind of went over this a little earlier in the show, but I know you're kind of on that first and third plateau, and I kind of am too, and it sounds like the team is too. So seems to be some consensus on that. Yeah,
I think that too. There's going to be the way you get to a first and third is number one, that is the normal operating cost. I even look at a guy like Stephon Diggs, for instance, as a track record on this, because some people get caught up with, well, this isn't the going rate anymore. When you look at the Diggs trade, he had only had 2,000-yard seasons in 5 years with the Vikings prior to the trade, and they were sub-1,000-yard seasons. They weren't 1,500-yard years, yet they still got the first and I think a third back for the Bills on that kind of deal for that. So that is the track record, in my opinion. And then we know the market's thin. That should only help out getting the returns back. And then it's just a matter of having a couple of teams in on it so that you have the bidding war cost drive it to that first and third marker that you want to receive, which I think you will, don't you, Brendan? On as far as there'll probably be 5-6 teams in on this that are relatively, within reason.
Yeah. And if I can't get there, I'm not really that interested in doing it.
I'm not either.
I know some people think he's not that good. I know some people think like, third round pick. And I understand that some people are saying that, but I like you said, the Stephon Diggs thing is a great parallel here. I think that there are other parallels here with like AJ Brown was traded for a first and a third. And that ended up being a terrible trade for the team that gave him up, by the way. So they should have gotten more, if anything. So, the price is the price. That's kind of how I operate with this sort of thing. This is not Percy Harvin, where we just had to get Percy Harvin off the team no matter what. I don't feel that way about DK. So,
and Percy was moved at the time. Like Percy went for a first and another guy went for a first and a third, and that was with the locker room cancer stuff following him. Right? Like that stuff was still coming out of him from that area with him and was widely known. So you still were able to, I know it's 10 years ago, but this is kind of where the trade's at. And again, let's not undersell the fact that the free agent market sucks for wide receivers. And this draft, as far as for X wide receivers that can get off press coverage at the line of scrimmage, really not good at all. You got just a handful of guys and that's a handful of guys through 4 rounds and only a couple that are actually really good, like the McMillan types. It's very few and far between on this one, which should help out the returns.
Right. And I personally don't really care where we send him as long as we get the real return. Like, I'd rather not send him to like the Rams or something like that, I guess. But I don't mind if he goes to the Packers. I don't mind if he goes to the Bills, to the Chiefs. I'm not sweating that part too much.
I'll give you here's where would be my ideal on this. You move DK Metcalf, you put in a Reek Woolen, you put in a Geno Smith. You get a second-round pick from the Raiders this year, and you get their first-round pick next year. That's my ideal.
I'm worried that pick is probably going to be like mid-first, probably. They're probably like a 7-8 win team.
Oh, it's a roll the dice. You never know. You never know on that. And remember, you got a Geno Smith at 35 years old as their quarterback at that point, one injury away. We've seen a lot of these older quarterbacks literally just take a step back on their drop back and have their Achilles snap, multiple in the last couple of years. I would, in my opinion, be willing to take that risk. It's a risk, but I like that risk. I like rolling that dice. We once gave up a second-round pick with the Denver Broncos to get a first-round pick back in return. That pick became Earl Thomas. I would go this route once again if I could.
What'd you say? Second this year, first next year?
Yeah.
I guess it's in like an Arch Manning lottery ticket, right?
That's right. Or at the very least, I've looked at these quarterbacks now, Brendan, because we're doing so much scouting of these guys. I'm sure you're doing the same, where you're scouting a defensive player that's playing up against Clemson with Klubnik, or a defensive player, playing up against, not with Arch, but with like Drew Aller and Penn State. And you're probably seeing some of the throws these guys are making. I like the talent of these quarterbacks in next year's class way more than this year's class. There's going to be 4 guys in the first round next year that are legitimate, that are capable, that are worthy of being selected, that have legitimate talent, legitimate size. So, you can, to me, parse that off. It doesn't have to be necessarily Arch. It'd be great if you get Arch, but I like that, Brendan. It's AFC, which is tough. AFC West, that's the division with the Broncos, the Chiefs, and Chargers that they've got to work through. That's a hellacious division for a first year of Carroll having to work through to try to get to a place of 7 wins, like you say. I see it as more of like their ceiling's probably at that point 6 wins, if not, and that there's a floor there of potentially, or 4 or 6 wins in the ceiling. Our ceiling would be like 2-3 wins maybe into that place.
We have a trade in the AFC South. We could discuss real quick.
Let's do it.
Want to go ahead and break it?
Break it.
Jacksonville Jaguars are sending wide receiver Christian Kirk to the Texans for a 2026 7th round pick. That is a dead giveaway. Dang.
Dead giveaway. Yeah, Jacksonville Jaguars in fire sale mode a little bit at this point, maybe. Kirk's pretty well high paid. I think that's a part of that, is that he was due on the books to, I think he's like heading into the last year of his deal. And I want to say, he had the highest cap cost of anybody on the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. He has a $24 million cap hit this year, Christian Kirk. So they obviously aren't going to pay that, the Texans. They're only going to have to pay $10 million of that approximately. He's got a base salary of 15, so they're 15 million on the base on that. So it's a little bit of it makes sense from the Texans. Dell's going to be out all next year.
Yeah,
from what I hear. So that makes sense from their perspective on that they go that route.
Is it just me, or should Tank Dell retire? Like, he's going to die next time he gets hit.
Well, and let's say with Tank Dell, because you and I talked about this with those guys coming out that year, it was Jordan Addison, it was Tank Dell. And we have a lot of these receivers at times coming out in recent years like this. This is why on those guys, I say, I don't like that size. That's too small. That's Tez Johnson, Oregon. He was 154 pounds.
Yeah, and
how is that going?
Garbage, but yeah.
And he tested like garbage. How is he going to do? Like, what is that guy going to do at the NFL level at that size? It's not going to hold up. It's the why I'm this way too, Brendan, with quarterbacks that are 6'1" and 185 pounds. I don't want to sign up for that. You need to have more girth on you to be able to take the destruction that your body is going to have to undertake when you get on a football field. And I don't know.
Yeah. Let's see here. The 12th man plays. Thank you for the 1999. Brendan, what kind of dog do you have? They are English cream Labradors.
Now they're leaving you alone, man.
For the moment, yeah. I think if you just kind of ignore them, they just kind of go to sleep. And they also have each other, because I have 2 of them, by the way. It's not a dog, it's 2. And they kind of keep each other occupied a little bit. That helps.
Nice.
But having 2 of them is still exhausting.
Oh, I imagine. I got 2 cats and they exhaust the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm. Right. And they're on a schedule where they like fall asleep by like 9. So you have to fall asleep by 9 or else they're not going to fall asleep. And then they want to get fed by 5:30. So I get up at 5:30 to feed them. And it's like, oh boy, this is not how I typically live.
Yeah, no, it's true. They will make you go to bed, dogs will, if they get mad about it if you don't go to bed and they're tired.
Mm-hmm.
Remind you to do that.
Right. Thank you for the 1999 12th man plays. Clamp God, thank you for the $5. Hear me out. DK for T. Higgins. So we just have to focus on OL, etc., in free agency and in draft. I know Higgins needs to be paid. Thoughts? Kind of feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul, don't it?
Yeah, I just think it's Higgins is going to want to be paid about the same place DK is going to be paid. There might be a couple $1 million difference, but it's so close at that amount that it really is negligible. And I don't think that that you'd be able to sell the fan base on. We're gonna pay for T. Higgins at 28, but we're gonna let DK go at 30. I think that'd be a tough sell. So if you're gonna spend that amount, I think it goes to DK at that point. And Higgins probably goes somewhere else. I think the Chargers is where Higgins ends up.
Yeah. Spotrac thinks Higgins is going to get 25, which I don't buy that. But if that were the case, that's a little more interesting. But I still feel like you're doing this because you don't want to spend big on a receiver when you're about to have to pay JSN. So I know you're paying Higgins a little less, but it's still the same basic idea.
I think that we got to think about this too, about the offensive structure going forward on this. And that, yeah, you need receivers in this day and age. And that it's nice to have two guys that could be this good, that you're spending that kind of money on with JSN or Higgins or JSN and DK. But the onus needs to be on the offensive line. You need to run the ball. You've spent as little money as anybody on the offensive line as anybody in the NFL over the past couple of years. It's easy to see why this group has been so bad. And you can't just merely say, well, we're just going to start investing in the offensive line. No, you have your finite amount of resources. So where are you going to pull from to invest in that offensive line? And if you're getting yourself right back in the same bed of the Tyler Lockett DK bed, we're going to pay both these guys this big amount of money. Well, then where are you pulling from? If it's not the offensive line, then what is the position you're pulling from? It's not defensive line. We're hammering the hell out of that. Probably not going to be safety. We're spending money on Julian Love. We might be spending money on Kobe Bryant when it comes down to it. So this is where you got to pull from somewhere. And to me, you pull from the place that's less important for how you build this roster up. I think receiver and running back are the two places that you should try to be careful about how you spend your money with the way this current Kubiak offense is put in, because it's more of an offense about distributing. You know, back in the day, you know, one thing that stands out about a West Coast offense, Brendan, is it's not about what we've dealt with even last year with the Grub, where it could be JSN, DK, JSN, DK, Fant, JSN, JSN, DK, GSN, DK. It's more about you get a guy like Hasselbeck back in the day that would have 22 completions or, you know, whatever, 22 completions in a game to probably like 13 different receivers, you know, 3 of them running backs, couple of tight ends. Like you're distributing the ball, because what you're doing is everything looks the same prior to the snap. Your formations look the same. You're looking for where you catch the defense leaning, and then you're having your quarterback hit to where the hole is on the defensive leaning, to where you've got them set up to go, which means it's not now centric around this weapon. It's now centric around what the defense is doing and how you're attacking their coverages and their scheme. And so this makes less of the onus needing to be that superstar guy on the outside that's just going to have 14 targets a game and 12 catches and be a monster.
Let's see here. Luke Schrade, thank you for the $4.99. No message there, but thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
Dogzilla, thank you for the $2. Idea, trade Geno and focus more on the punt game. You know, I mean, punting the ball a lot is a great way for the Seahawks to get their best player on the field as much as possible, right? Indeed.
Well, and that's the one we don't know any of the moves at this point, Brendan, that are going to be made outside anywhere else. Geno, DK, the one we do know is going to be made is Michael Dixon's getting his contract extension this offseason.
Yeah. And, you know, he's been real cool about it. We haven't heard anything about him yet. He's not upset about the contract.
He's not making any noise. He's not asking for trade requests. He's not saying I need to be the priority.
Yeah. 4 years, $16 million. That would be like just barely the new high watermark for punters in the league. Probably something like that.
Yeah. And then you don't save any money. I ran the numbers on this. He just stays at about the cost, but you lock him in for extra years.
Yeah. I think you could maybe get it like save $500,000, but not anything of meaning.
No,
you're not doing it for that. You're doing it because it's Michael Dixon, and you know, he's great.
Yeah. You love how he's done, and you're perfectly happy to keep him in the future and heading into his prime and all that. So,
Adam Baum, thank you for the $4.99. No Ernest Jones extension yet. Do y'all think we're going to target a linebacker in the draft? Well, that is one other thing that happened yesterday. It was really, really muted because the DK announcement took over the world. But Ernest Jones, I guess, had knee surgery, and that surgery has caused contract negotiations with the Seahawks to pause. So I do think we have to revisit this a little bit, because he was already a slower player, and he's already had knee issues kind of hamper his career at 24 years old.
I think some of Ernest's situation on this, Brendan, is, if you agree with this, is going to be informed by what you do with DK and Geno. If I'm not signing DK and I'm not signing Geno, I think that does lower down even if Ernest's knee was 100%, that would lower down to me the priority of necessarily signing him to a contract extension. You add the knee injury on top of this, if those moves happen, and it almost kind of removes it off the board completely for me. Now, if you sign him, that does change this a little bit, but my understanding of this is that this is going to take quite a bit of time, because he's got to basically wait till he can pass a physical. And this is also going to affect him from other teams out there across the sport, as far as, you know, they're going to wait too. That's not going to help him get out the max salary that he's looking to get. You know, he's not going to get $14 million a year June 3rd when he can sign that extension at that point. So I think this kind of does lead us down the road of we're probably going to look to target the inside linebacker in the draft here is why, especially with Mike having the success he did in targeting Tyrese in the 4th round.
Yeah, if you believe that McDonald's a linebacker whisperer, maybe spending $12 or $13 million a year on one is not a great idea.
Yeah, especially one that might have a little bit of damaged goods aspect to him. I mean, the knee's one thing. He's wearing the freaking apparatus on his arm throughout the whole year as well. What's going on with that thing? I mean, is that 100% or is that dodgy too in his elbow?
Yeah, he's the winter soldier, I guess.
I guess so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, this is another thing that might push you in the direction of taking a step back in 2025 because now you have to replace Ernest Jones. And you're not really going to get that much for Ernest Jones. You're not going to trade him. He's a free agent. You're not going to get a comp pick because that would be next year, if at all. So now you have one more thing you need to address with the same amount of resources that you thought you were going to have anyway. It's like, man, another thing I need to be added to the pile here. That's another reason why maybe you just decide we're not going to go for broke right now.
Yeah, with me, my instinct on this was already to take a step back heading into this offseason. And these kind of pieces of news that we've had come out since then has been done nothing but to more reinforce my outlook on this, that this was the proper decision. This is the proper choice to go with, that there is a drive here to try to keep just pushing this down. And I get that drive, but I don't think it's the smartest approach for this team to get us to a contending state.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing real quick, because I talked about this possibility, the thing that you're talking about in a video a couple days ago, and I had somebody get upset at me because I was talking about tanking. It's not tanking, really, that we're talking about.
No.
It's not chasing something that you're not going to catch, right? If you decide we're not going to catch this, then don't chase it. Then don't waste your time. It's not about tanking. Tanking's for losers. I don't do the tanking thing. What we're talking about is just deciding this is not the time to go all in. We have 8-4 offsuit. This is not the time to go all in.
I've told you before, I find myself believing the teams find themselves in 4 different states: rebuilding, ascending, purgatory, in between, and elite. And it's very important for every team, every offseason, to appropriately gauge where they're at on that pecking order. And that when you look at teams that go wrong, Brendan, it tends to be a team that looks at itself on that pecking order and misidentifies where it's at on that pecking order. We think we're contenders, but we're actually in purgatory. We think we're about ready to rebuild, but we're actually ascending, or we're ascending and we should be rebuilding. There's a lot of places where you can find teams just misunderstanding where they're at. And I think that's been a big part of us, Brendan. That's why I've hammered saying this has been a problem for 10 years. For 10 years, every offseason you come into it and you tell your fans from a general manager standpoint, from a head coach standpoint, we're contending this year. They didn't say, Brendan, over the last 10 years, every year, we're going to just try to get in the playoffs. We just need to get in the playoff mix. The Raiders next year tell you it's about getting the playoffs. The Cardinals organization right now, they're telling you next year it's all about getting into the playoffs. That's the terminology and the exact wording they're using. Our front office, our coaching for a 10-year span, every single year, use the wording contending. We're contending this year. We are contenders this year. That's what they told you. Now, they could have been lying. It could have been a political BS speech, but that is what they said. Every year. It wasn't getting into the playoffs. The expectation, they said, is we want to set your guys' expectation this year. And that expectation is that we are a contender. And then you didn't even get into the playoffs, or you barely got in the playoffs, or you barely just got a one playoff win against a lesser team in that one playoff when you got that one particular year. That's been the way you've rolled for 10 years. You've not been a contender. So the misidentification has been the big problem of this organization for a 10-year period. And that's why, as much as anything, I want to take this step back, is because you've had that problem of misidentifying yourself and where you properly are situated versus the rest of the competition in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and believe me, even taking a step back, I'm not happy about it. I'm not looking forward to a year of just going through the motions. I'm not looking forward to a year of talking about this dead behind the eyes team, but I don't think that talking about a team that's stuck in the middle is going to be much better.
Right. That's the point. It's being in the middle is no, that's not any fun either. So it's not about choosing, well, we could have fun or not have fun. No, neither of these options are going to be fun, but one option can lead you to actually getting yourself into a much healthier state to get yourself to a contending state. And the other one, you remain in that purgatory. You're in that river, you're spinning in that whirlpool, and you're not getting down the river. You're not progressing down the river. You're just spinning in the whirlpool over and over.
Mm-hmm. All right. So as for linebacker in the draft, I think there's a decent chance of that. I'll tell you this: everybody in my Discord server loves Jihad Campbell and
Yeah,
would love to get him.
he's great.
And if things break that way, then I will not be too sad about losing Ernest Jones.
Find myself very, very close to putting one of my rare blue chip grades on Jihad. I didn't have many blue chip grades in this draft. I just finally decided I'm going to give Michael Williams my blue chip addition, and I'm very driven right now to do the same with Jihad Campbell and watching his tape. I was watching again last night. I was watching actually Malachi Moore, the safety, and Jihad just keeps flashing all over the tape.
Right. Let's see here. Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for the $10. My biggest concern with trading DK has nothing to do with his production with us. It's the high probability the team he goes to turns him into a Hall of Fame player and we look like damn fools. I mean, if he goes to the Chiefs, I would expect him to put up some pretty monster numbers with Mahomes, admittedly. Same with maybe a team like the Bills. But at a certain point, I think you have to ask, well, are you just doing it? Are you just keeping him out of spite then because you know he'll be better somewhere else? Like, I don't think that's a very good reason to keep him at a certain point, especially with everything else going on so far this offseason.
Yeah, I think, Jeffrey, your concern is a valid one, and one that I think is a bit at the heart of this very complicated story of DK Metcalf, and complicated in what the right outcome is and the right approach to it is. And I think a chapter of this tale is the chapter of lack of really getting the most out of him, a lack of making him that number one receiver, and having an offense that's built around him and doing what other teams would typically do with this type of player, and that we have failed him in that way. And we would have failed him in that way if we make this kind of trade. And I don't like that part of it. In the same way that Brendan talked about not liking to take the step back. These are not decisions that I like to have to make. These are more decisions of I've got to eat my vegetables more than as I want to eat my vegetables. And it very well could be the case that it comes down to that we see DK go out there and elevate to that Hall of Fame status moving on, and that we find that we really did screw the pooch on getting the most out of him. And I think that that's the way this could be, but I don't know that that necessarily guarantees the fact that we're going to get the most out of him then moving into next year either. It is just sometimes a situation of you just couldn't quite make it work in a given place. A guy just needs a fresh start. You need a fresh pair of eyes with new players on this to kind of get it right. And it just kind of goes that way sometimes, I think. But it's very valid, Jeffrey, to believe that that could be the way that this does, play out.
And, I'm sitting here thinking about the history of NFL trades, blockbuster trades, where there's a big time player that goes for a bunch of, prospects or picks or whatever. I know in basketball, it almost always works out in favor of the team that acquires the superstar. In the NFL, I feel like that's not the case at all. I feel like the team that acquires the prospects often comes out feeling very good about themselves.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair with it. I mean, the Chiefs moved Tyreek Hill, and that worked out best in their favor. The Vikings didn't seem to be impelled by Diggs moving on, and Diggs went on and had his best production out there with the Bills. He turned into a 1,500-yard receiver with the Buffalo Bills. So I think you're right. As you go through the line of these kind of moves that have been made, it does tend to be one that it does work out for the team that is moving more than it works out for the team that's getting.
Yeah, Joey Galloway, Russell Wilson. I'd say Jay Cutler. I don't know. I mean, the Bears made one good run, but other than that, I don't think they were thrilled with the way the Cutler era worked out.
Yeah.
It wasn't a blockbuster at that point, but the McNabb trade turned into a complete joke. He was out of there after 10 games after they gave up a second-round pick for him in Washington.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson. That's the all-timer, right? That's
an all-timer with that one. Yeah.
Him and Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd still put Russell Wilson up there, but I think that Watson trade has become so viscerally bad, it's elevated itself even above that.
It has. That'll be the worst one all time. But top 5, Russ's trade will still be included in there, I believe, too.
Yeah, until I don't know, maybe the Jets are going to trade a couple firsts for Kirk Cousins or something. I feel it. I feel it coming.
Maybe so.
Let's see here. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. I love how fair you both are to players and don't factor in ignorant takes about their race or orientation. That's the problem with the Hurts takes. Yeah, there's probably a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, there's some of that still exists through, and I think we're starting to get through maybe the end of that. Be calm, where that long thought process that was even around in the 80s when I was kind of growing up was very prevalent. I mean, this is why a guy like Warren Moon doesn't get drafted in a draft where there's, I think, freaking 13 rounds. Nobody ends up taking him. He's got to go play in Canada. His talent, you can even still go back and watch the UW days of Warren Moon running around back there, and you can see the talent. You can see how he throws and how he runs, and like the fact that didn't appeal to the NFL team. They're like, nah, we're good. But Hurts is a hell of a player in what he brings. He's got limitations, but he's got a lot of stuff too that's beyond just physicality stuff. It's how he does the tush push and the 600-pound squat and the ability to run that play better than anybody else can run it. It is the decision making. It is, and that decision making is not something to be undertaken or to taken lightly with. This decision making is one of my biggest things that I look for in a quarterback prospect. I look for arm strength and I look for decision making, and that's where with him he's very strong in that way. So he's fine. He fits the mode, and it wouldn't surprise me if he goes out and wins another Super Bowl at some point in his career, because he understands what he can do, what he can't do. And that's especially get into playoff football when you have to manage things. It's so much about managing in playoff football than it is about making all of these wonderful throws and plays. It's managing the game. And he knows it. He knows what time it is when he gets into those situations.
Yeah. And then B. Calmsey clearly also sent this $2. Hurts' arm is a lot weaker than Geno's arm. Facts. And then this also kind of going with it. Hurts makes up for his arm strength with his elite running ability and processing coverage. O-line and Kubiak will help Geno process better, hopefully. Yeah. And when I talk about Hurts, one thing that I want to say, one thing about Hurts is I say he can't really throw the ball very well beyond 12 yards. And people are like, oh, what about that 9 route he threw? And say, I'm not talking about that throw. Like the 9 route, okay, that proves that he has an arm that can get the ball down the field. I'm talking about throws into tight windows over the middle of the field where he needs to get the ball over the linebacker and settle it in between the corner and safety. You know, these throws that guys like Justin Herbert makes all the time. That's what Hurts is not very good at. And he's in an offense where he never has to do that pretty much.
Yeah, it's the odd thing, I think, where you would get a guy that would atypically, if he's going to have some throwing limitations, would be able to not hit that 9 route as well. And he's the odd guy in that he really throws a really nice deep ball and an accurate deep ball and a precise deep ball. He can put in the right spot, and that's not what you tend to get. But all these quarterbacks have all these kind of different pluses and negatives. I mean, you have a guy like Lamar Jackson, for instance, a bit on the other side. He's got more arm strength than a Hurts, can target the middle of the field, can make the intermediate throws and be very accurate on those throws, but then the guy can't throw a 9 route for his life. And so there is a little bit of, every quarterback's got a little bit of a give and take on this kind of thing. And where it's really intelligent is both Hurts and the Eagles have taken a look at this quarterback, and Hurts is looking at himself. What can I do? What can I do? What do I need to stay within? I mean, a big part of what you see with Geno last year is sometimes not knowing his limitations, of trying to do too much of the superhero stuff rather than understanding, protect yourself against the bad mistake, protect yourself against that errant poor throw.
Yeah. And I think also a big part of it is Ryan Grubb's offense required him to try to make a lot of those throws.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that's why you get the results that you get in many cases. I think that it would take a superhuman talent. It would take like a literal top 3 quarterback to run Grubb's offense effectively, because so much of it is an insanely high degree of difficulty.
Yeah. I'm with that as well.
Mm-hmm. You're right. So, Hurts I think he's decent. He's kind of a unicorn in that he has such a unique skill set. He's good at things that, like that tush push stuff. That's legit. That's a skill. Now, I'm not going to comment on the controversy on whether or not it should be banned. I actually don't really think it should be banned. I don't care that much. But that's a skill, and that's something that he's better at than anybody else by far. Running the ball, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league at, just in general. But then he's just so lackluster in some areas in terms of actually throwing the ball. And he's a unicorn in that regard.
What he really shows you, and what the lesson here is to learn, is that we walked into this Super Bowl and everyone, this narrative kept fitting harder and harder in to be that you have to have the star quarterback. You have to have the quarterback that can do all this and do all that and do all this, and that he's going to carry the day. And it's all, and then we learned with a guy like Hurts doing this, not only now going and winning a Super Bowl, but getting to his second Super Bowl, is that no, it does still come down to there's other ways to get this done. It doesn't have to be just this road to go and get a Super Bowl title, that you can do it with a quarterback that maybe has some limitations to their game. They need to have pluses and things they bring to the table, but they can have some limitations as long as you're building the team intelligently and you're building around that player's strengths. And if you're doing that, then you can go win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, what's Jared Goff really? What's Jared Goff? And he's played in a Super Bowl. He played for the number 1 seed last year. Probably would have made the Super Bowl if the defense didn't completely melt by the playoffs. Yeah. Even with as badly as he played in the playoffs, I think they still win if they have a competent defense. So, and what's Jared Goff really? He's got a nice arm, but what he can't process. He doesn't process at all, really, feels like.
No, he wants to hit the back foot and let it go, right? He wants to do his pre-snap reads, have the reads tell him where this is at, and then he's going to go to that pre-snap read. If you get him into the point of he having to process, then he's going to get uncomfortable. And I agree with you. The story last year with the Lions was not that Goff got exposed in the playoffs. The story is that they had 75 injuries, 60 guys on IR by the end of the year, and that's every team gets to a spot where it's one too many injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Heart goes out to those Lions fans, by the way. It was so obviously their year, and then somebody upstairs was like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, they got, boy, they just every week you were watching. Another guy goes IR, another guy's limping off, another guy's being carted off. Boy, you just kept going, boy, they're holding up, but this is getting very, very thin.
Mm-hmm. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5. Can you name scenarios / free agent pickups where the offense can get better even after trading DK Metcalf? We're going to get to the free agency stuff in just a couple of minutes here, actually, some of our top guys. But we put our list together, I think, before this DK stuff kicked up. So we didn't really talk a lot about receiver. There's one guy that I like. I don't think he's a DK replacement, but I think he would be an interesting fit. I kind of like Josh Palmer, the Chargers guy, looks like he's going to be let go, who's going to be a free agent this offseason. I think he would be a good number 3 receiver, but I don't think he's a guy you get to replace Metcalf. No. So I don't really have a good free agent solution for replacing Metcalf in the way that you're talking about, but I like Josh Palmer. That's my guy.
If I could say not a free agent situation on this, King, but kind of a creative way to do this would be you go out to the Saints and you say, hey, Saints, what are you going to call? We move a Metcalf. You say, what are you going to charges for a Shaheed and for a Taysom Hill combination? What's that package look like for us? And Saints have got to dump a little bit of cap space. They give you a trade. You move them for a 4th round pick or whatever that would be. You get Shaheed in there as your number 1 guy. You go draft a guy like Jack Besh as your Z receiver. You have JSN still fitted in here at that point. You go out there and you sign Tevin Jenkins, and then you sign Drew Dahlman as your 2 offensive line centerpiece kind of pickups. Is that team better than a Metcalf without those 2 offensive linemen? And instead of those 2 linemen, you go with Aaron Banks and Dalton Risner. I think that you're better in probably the secondary scenario. I mean, there's probably still even a little bit more money to go out there and be active on the market to go play with at that point beyond just the Dahlman and the Tevin Jenkins signing. Because those guys on the first year of their cap hit's only going to be around 13 million, 14 million. So if DK's on a $30 million a year deal, you're talking about costing, you still got some more money to play with beyond that.
Mm-hmm. So there are ways to do it. You talked about the idea of a quarterback being more of a point guard where he's just a distributor. And, you had that idea. Could you replace DK with 3 other players? Maybe again, Kubiak's going to be running a lot of 2 tight end stuff. Could you get a Josh Palmer and then Rashid Shaheed? Maybe you could maybe cook it up a little bit. I assume you don't want Olave because of the concussions.
They've got to not want to be given what they can get for him as a talent. The concussions have to be where we get the discount back on him then on the other side of that, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to want a 2. I don't want to give you a 2. I'll give you a 3 or a 4. Mm-hmm. Does that really move the Saints needle at that point? I don't know if it would.
Saints need to do something. That's a very obnoxious team right now to just have dangling out there to win 5 games every year.
It's another team that misses it. Like I said, the main problem teams make is not that they miss prospects, whether they spend this money and that they shouldn't have spent it. The problem is you misidentify yourself. And the Saints have done it now for 14 years. They will not take that step back. It's that these teams just fight it tooth and nail, Brendan. And I don't know why, because even when it's obvious to them that they should do it, they will just not do it.
I think I know why they're afraid of getting fired. I think that's as simple as that.
I guess that's fair. But a team like the Cowboys, for instance, that doesn't do it. Nobody's firing Jerry Jones from general manager. You're the owner. What's the excuse or the reason there? And
He only cares about making money. Super Bowl doesn't really make him more money. He's already making more money than anybody else.
Probably so. Probably so.
Okay. Jeffrey, thank you for the $5. Here's the dumb question. How are we going to sell tickets? Literally no stars left on a team. The national media already loves to ignore 200 to 300 tickets. I mean, that would be kind of I understand that concern that the ownership might have. I would really hate that to be the reason why they decide to make a particular decision rather than another decision.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes down to this is the proper decision that we need to do to build the team to a contending state, it's going to take us a while to get there. And then somebody sort of speaks up in the room and they go, yeah, but we are going to get there. Yeah, a year from now, we will be the contender state. We'll be financially in a lot better shape. Our cap will be great. But you know what? For a year, we're not going to sell tickets well. I would hate if that's an overriding factor to determine the proper approach versus what is just the proper approach. I know that they need to sell tickets, but that's not the end all goal is to sell tickets. I know they need to sell tickets, but that's not the goal. The goal here is to try to become a winner. And if it's about selling tickets or becoming the winner, I want to choose the lane of how to get the winner. That's the important part to go at. Yeah.
And look, the bottom line is, if you don't want to get to this point where it's one or the other, then do better. Don't draft Dwayne Eskridge. Don't draft LJ Collier. Don't draft, even Jordan Brooks, who wasn't terrible. You still could have done better there. Don't spend all that money on Draymond Jones. Don't hire Ryan Grubb. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do better. And you don't have to make this decision. You'll just have a great team that's selling a lot of tickets. And you're like, cool, we're winning and we sell tickets. Yeah. Now, because you made the mistakes, and not everything recently has been a mistake, but there have been a fair few. Now you're in this situation where it feels like one or the other, potentially.
It does. Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, I understand the concern, but I'm not tripping too hard on that one.
No.
All right. Real quick, there were two things that happened earlier today, although I can't find confirmation on the Nwosu thing. But I do know that we re-signed Josh Joby. We don't know the particulars of the deal yet, but Josh Joby is back. I like it. I'm a Josh Joby fan.
Mm-hmm. Me too. You're going to need some corners in here. So getting some depth in here is a good thing. And he played pretty well for us last year. Had some tough games, but had some good games too.
Given the situations he was thrown into, I thought he did quite well. I was very happy with his work overall. And according to you, I can't find anything about this yet, but I guess we
look at Corbin Smith. Corbin Smith's Twitter will have the update on it there.
Okay. Let me check there. I didn't see it anywhere else. But apparently we restructured his deal and it created about 3.3 million in cap space, which is not a lot, but it could mean something.
Yeah, it's a little, I mean, the thing with it was if you're going to move him, you save some money, but then you're going to probably want to go find a capable, at the very least, rotational edge rusher type, which was then probably going to end up costing, with the dead money you had on Uchenna and the new money you gave them, let's say it's a 1-year, $5 million deal, it ends up being equivalent to basically what you were paying Uchenna at that point anyway. So if you could just get him to just restructure to save the 3, you kind of go, well, look, we're getting a little savings and we're still keeping this. We're not pulling another hole open because we're going to have to address that at that point, especially having released Roy Robertson Harris, where you would have been down to basically 2 edges at that point.
Right. Oh, BComC clearly, thank you for the $2. Feels like DK needs a brotherly hug.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Hard for me to have too much sympathy in this situation. It's not like he's on his rookie deal and we're trying to make him play out the 4th year of it or anything like that. But yeah.
No. But it's understand how he reacts this way. I mean, we don't know if DK would have done the request for the trade if they hadn't have had this trade stuff leak out last week. We don't know. And if I'm in DK's shoes, I probably would have done the same thing if I was hearing the team was dangling me out like that, especially if they lowballed me on the offer.
Okay, so now we get to what was the original point of this show. I don't know how much time we're going to be able to spend on this stuff, although it is worth noting that with the updates of the last couple days, our plan for free agency might change significantly. I'm going to go ahead and just say this here. Free agency starts Monday, so we're a few days away. And if the plan is trade DK Metcalf, trade Geno Smith, trade maybe a guy like a Woolen, I guess you would throw him in there as well, then I'm not really looking to spend much of anything in free agency personally.
I'm not looking to do as much as either on that. I think that there's certainly an opening to maybe do a Dahlman at his age, to where if this is a thing where you have confidence in 26, you're going to get this right. That's one where maybe you're a little bit open to it there. But I would be completely okay with the team at that point if they make those moves of tightening the belt strap and kind of going to a little bit, as much as I've hated in the past, I'd be okay with it right now, which is a little bit more of the 1-year deals, because this is a little bit more about saving that cap space, if not being able to even roll some of the cap into 2026, God forbid. I wouldn't mind doing that either.
And, maybe we can get something of a comp pick for Ernest Jones. Somebody's going to sign him eventually, just something.
The only worry I have on that is that once you get past the June 1st, that's where the compensatory pick comes in. And if a team
really, okay.
Yeah. So if it gets past that thing, that's the way they did that with the compensatory, which sucks.
All right. Now, none of this is to say that we know for a fact that we're taking a step back in 2025. This team could still keep Metcalf. This team could trade Metcalf and still decide we're going for it. So we should talk about our favorite free agent targets. You sent me a list of 15.
Yep.
I put together a list of 15 as well. So I say we count down from 15 on each of our lists, and we can briefly talk about each player. There is going to be overlap. So when there is, we don't need to relitigate it a second time, right? If we both like the player, then there's no need to talk about it again, right?
Sure. Yep.
All right. So let's go ahead and go through, just counting down from 15. Your 15 was Teair Tart, the nose tackle from the Chargers.
Yeah, gives you the nose tackle you need. You're probably going to need 2 nose tackles this offseason with both the draft and probably finding free agency, because of the fact that you just don't know what you really have in Cameron Young at this point. And Teair Tart's a guy that not only gives you nose tackle ability, but also it gives you a guy that was kind of a pressure machine at times last year for Tennessee. So a rarity of being a guy that can give you some nose tackle snaps and be a run defender in there, but also be able to give you some ability as a pass rusher in addition to that.
Was he a Titaner or a Charger last year? I thought he was a Charger.
Yeah, it was Charger. That's right. I'm misspeaking.
Well, that's the number 1 defense in the league last year that he was anchoring. That means something.
It does indeed, especially a team that wasn't necessarily driven, kind of like Bosa was in and back in and out of the lineup, and they've got good players on that defense, but he was one of those guys that was a standout for sure.
Yeah, I liked him as well. He didn't make my list, but he was close. I do like Tart quite a bit.
It'd be nice to be able to get the nose tackle handle before the draft, at least a little bit.
I agree. My 15 is Coleman Shelton, a center from the Bears. I think this is like a reasonably priced option to upgrade at center. I think he's better than Oluwatimi. He was one of the few bright spots last year for that Bears offensive line. He was good for the Rams for several years before he went to the Bears. And I think the price on him would be somewhere around like maybe $5 or $6 million a year. And I think that he's a pretty decent fit as well in a outside zone scheme. So I like Coleman Shelton.
Yeah, he's all right. He's a functionally good player. Probably, like you say, upgrade over what you have in Oluwatimi for sure.
All right. Sorry, I'm waiting for my dog to finish looking at the street so I can let him back in, or her back in, excuse me. I don't know what she's doing. Okay. So your number 14 was actually, looks like another nose tackle here. DJ Jones, most recently of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, a little undersized guy. Guy that's given us some problems at times when we've played him. He once bent that small little center that we had, Hunt, in half in a game that we played him. But he's been a really good player for Denver since going over from the Niners. Been very consistent. A little bit of an older player. Probably have to spend a little bit of money to bring him in, but he has been so consistent, and a little bit like Tart, where he gives you good play on both sides, where so you get a good run defender, you get a good pass rusher, not uber dynamic in either area, but functional in both.
Yeah, I think he's going to cost a little too much personally, because part of his value is that he's not just a nose tackle. He can also do 3-tech, and he wouldn't really get to do that here because of the log jam we have there as is. So, but I like him. He's definitely the best nose tackle available in free agency this year. Absolutely. This next guy for me, little bit of a homer pick, so you're going to have to indulge me for a second here. Levi Onwuzurike, former Washington Husky.
Or you're husky honking it, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Second round pick, really talented coming out of college, went to Detroit. Never really got on track there, but he started to flash some positive signs last year. Finally made it back from a major injury he had. You're going to get him cheap because he hasn't had that breakout year yet, but he's still very young. And I think that you need like a little bit extra on that defensive line right now behind even Big Cat and Murphy. So he would kind of become like your third, kind of sort of your third 3 tech, but I think he also offers a little bit more than that. So he would be like a good depth signing, I think, for the defensive line.
Yeah, he's a guy that's fun. And with UW, they used him kind of weirdly when he was there, as far as almost making him more of a nose tackle than a 3 tech. And so there's been a bit of a transitional period too with him there as a 3 tech to Detroit. But I liked him coming out quite a bit. I'd certainly be interested in what he could offer, especially if you move on from kind of a Jaron Reed type, and looking at this kind of guy as a cheaper replacement, younger, cheaper replacement.
Your number 13 was Brandon Scherf, right guard, most recently of the Jaguars, I think more famously of Washington. But Brandon Scherf, a little bit older at this point, but still out there starting. What do you think?
Yeah, this is definitely an older dude that is not played his best ball. This wouldn't be necessarily your ideal move that you would go to with a guy like this and saying that this is an number 1 move. This is sort of your kind of going secondhand parts, but you are looking to upgrade the position necessarily past where it's been. And I mean, even getting it to like a league average state versus where it's been would be much better than where we've been with that position. So you're not going to have to spend a lot of money for him. He is older, but older offensive linemen can still tend to be pretty good at times. Maybe he has a bounce back getting out of that Jacksonville Jaguar program. I think you're getting him on a 1-year deal. It's pretty cheap at that point. Again, it's not going to be a significant upgrade or a long-term answer there, but it would be a short-term stopgap that would be better than what we probably have.
Yeah, if you could really figure out like the other spots on the interior, then I think Scherf gets in there and his shortcomings can easily be disguised by some of these other players.
Yeah.
All right. My number 13, I struggled with a little bit, but he's the only he's the closest thing to a high-end tight end in this crop that I like. It's Tyler Conklin, tight end from the Jets. Put together a nice little career in New York, had a lot of production, and he's a decent workable blocker, which I'll tell you is in short supply right now. Almost every tight end I looked at in free agency this year was an atrocious blocker. Like the Saints guy, what's his name? Jawan Johnson?
Yeah, Jawan Johnson.
Yeah, he's a former wide receiver. He doesn't really block. That's not his game at all, from what I've seen. So Conklin's the closest thing I could find. So if you cut Fant and you want a veteran tight end to replace him, I think Conklin's really the only option.
He's okay. Yeah, I'm hesitant on the tight ends just because it's such a good draft class where I feel like this is the class, this is the time not to necessarily pay on those guys, but wouldn't come in expensive because I don't think a lot of teams are going to offer a lot of money to a guy like Conklin because of that. So you get him probably pretty cheap at that point.
Your number 12 is another right guard, another veteran, Will Hernandez, most recently of the Cardinals. I think he was a Giant before.
Struggled to realize the talent that he had with the Giants where they made him a pretty relatively high pick, but then found his footing with the Cardinals. Injuries, a little bit of a concern with him on that, but really started to kind of stabilize and settle in there with them. And I liked what I've seen from him on the tape. The injuries are a little bit of a worry. You got to make sure he's clear on the medicals, but I think this guy, again, could be a definite upgrade over what we've got there currently at the position.
Right. Again, it's another one of those things where it's fine if you really go all out to get a blue chip like center or left guard. But if you make Will Hernandez like your big get of the offseason, well, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My number 12 is also a right guard. It's a little more high profile. And I struggled a little with this one because he's coming off a pretty big injury. But Will Fries, the right guard from the Indianapolis Colts, he was playing some really good football last year, and then he got hurt. And I think maybe you could get him for a little bit of a discount because of that, but you're also playing with fire. But there is still tremendous upside here for this guy to be one of the better right guards in football.
Yeah, you might be able to get it. I do think in looking at him that he'd only really had gotten into that year of playing well this year. If you looked at his, I think, previous years, he hadn't been a particularly good player. So maybe the light bulb was just turning on with him at that point. Another guy we got to be sure about the injury stuff and what is going to be the cost on it, but could be an interesting addition for sure.
Okay, your number 11 was Brady Christensen, the center from Carolina. Remember scouting him in the draft a few years ago.
Yeah, former tackle coming out of, I think, BYU, out of the draft, if I'm not mistaken, and a guy who can bounce between guard and center, can give you functional play in there. I think that he probably would be an upgrade over what you have in Oluwatimi in there. Another guy that wouldn't cost you a lot of money, I don't think, as far as what that would bring to get that upgrade there. So it wouldn't move the needle a lot on some of these moves in my back end of my list on this one, but they would be at least marginal improvements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think Christensen's noticeably better than Oluwatimi?
He's marginally better than Olatimi, and he's not going to cost a significant amount of resources to bring him in.
Maybe you could have him and Oluwatimi compete in camp, and may the best man win. That might work. Okay.
I'm down. If you're doing the Austin Blythe, Evan Brown special, this guy's better than those guys on that kind of pecking order. Is he like a huge? No, but he's better. He's better than those guys. And again, pretty good age too, where he's heading right into his prime. So maybe you can kind of tap into a little bit more there with him too.
Next guy for me, my number 11 is my nose tackle that I liked, TJ Artiderell-Slaton from Green Bay.
Oh goodness.
So the thing with this guy is that he was playing pretty well. Things were going pretty well in his career. And then last year he played way more snaps at 3-tech as like a B-gap guy, and his play fell off a cliff. I think that if you got him and you put him back more as like that pure nose and let him play most of his snaps at nose, you'd get better stuff out of him. That's kind of how I'm approaching this.
That's fair enough. He's got a Key and Peele name there. I don't know too much on him with Terrell Slayton.
Yeah, everyone calls him TJ Slayton, I guess, which I don't blame them.
Yeah, exactly. That's a mouthful of a name.
Yeah, I think something happened where Green Bay lost a player and they just tried to play Slayton at 3-tech and it didn't work at all.
Well, you got Ryan Clark, so Clark's your main nose tackle there. Kenny Clark.
Kenny Clark's
their main nose tackle in there, so they don't want to move Kenny. Kenny's not a 3-tech.
They tried to fit him in the square hole.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right. Your number 10. This is a left guard from Minnesota, also known for his time in Denver, Dalton Risner. Great name.
Dalton, a great name. Just a functional guy, and just more of the same on kind of these guys. I don't think that there's anything that's bright about him. I don't think it's a matter of it's a pure scheme kind of fit. At Denver, he did play under, I think, there where Kubiak was there when he was there at Denver. So I think he would have some familiarity to this scheme in general terms. I think he would be an upgrade over what we've had at left guard recently. Would not be a huge upgrade, but not a guy that's also going to cost a significant amount of resources to bring him in or salary. So a bit of a value signing like some of these on my back end of my list. This is why they're in my back kind of 5-15. But a guy that you at least check, you get this checked off, you get this taken care of. It's less of a need that you're driven towards than when you get to the draft.
Yeah, Risner kind of had a reputation in Denver for being a guy who got worse every season. Like his best year in Denver was his rookie year. And then as time went on, he got worse and worse and worse. And then he went to Minnesota and he kind of revived his career a little bit. I think he played a lot of right guard in Minnesota, though, worth noting.
I believe that's true. Yes.
Okay, my number 10 is also a left guard, although I want to be clear here. This is a pure backup. This is a pure depth signing. It's Lucas Patrick, the left guard from New Orleans, and this is purely because of the Kubiak connection. I think this is somebody that Kubiak would like to bring over and be kind of like the Laken Tomlinson of last year, except he hopefully doesn't actually have to play. So get him for like $2 million as like a veteran backup. I think that would be a great fit.
Yeah, I love him, man. I mean, he had his best year of his career under Kubiak last year. He's played for a long period of time, all the way back to 2017 in this league. And that's, Kubiak says, hey, I got him out of this year. I got league average play out of this guy last year. For like you say, if you get a league average play out of the offensive line at that price, that's a huge benefit to us because our baseline has been so below that as far as our performative level at the position recently.
Yeah, and if, let's say, we draft a left guard prospect that isn't ready to play for week 1, then maybe Lucas Patrick is just the placeholder until that guy's ready.
That's right. Amen. Amen on that.
All right, your number 9 was, this is B.J. Hill of the Cincinnati Bengals. He used to be a New York Giant. B.J. Hill.
This would be kind of a 3-tech fill in slash a guy that can do some nose tackle stuff. You can move him a little bit between the two. He's kind of a bit of a tweener, but between both, it'd be a little bit of maybe a cheaper Jaron Reed replacement if Jaron's going to get a decent contract after his strong season. Just a guy that you're going to need to probably fill that hole a little bit somehow or another. He's not as much of the nose tackle, but I do like a little bit of what he brings all around play wise. And I know that I put a little bit of a log jam in front of Murphy, but I like Hill as a player.
Yeah. The question is he going to be able to do enough nose tackle stuff to justify what I think will be a non-trivial contract? I think he will get some decent money. So can he play enough nose tackle?
That would be the key of it. Yeah, absolutely. I have confidence. I think he could, but it is a question.
My number 9 is a little bit, it's another depth signing. It's something you do only if you let go of Noah Fant. It's Mo Alley Cox from Indianapolis. The thing I like about Mo Alley Cox is how big he is. He's like 270. So he can kind of operate as like that 6th offensive lineman. He's not a stellar blocker, but I think he's a good blocker, which is more than I can say for most of these bums. So I think if you want that really good blocking veteran tight end who is much bigger than the average tight end, Mo Alley Cox is your guy.
I like he's functional, not going to cost a lot. So it's as long as you can get him in at the cheap rate on those kind with that's got to be the key on those kind of deals with tight ends. But that could be he could be workable, and he's big. That's for sure. He's got big long arms too, and big catch radius. Give me just a quick second here. I get a little copy. We're back.
Not a problem. All right, everybody, just hang out for just one moment here. We have over 600 people in the stream. I know some of that's from X, because X counts people on the who have viewed the tweet as viewers, which is not entirely accurate. But regardless, we got a lot of people in here right now, so hope everybody's having a good time. Excuse me. And next week when we do this show, assuming that we do a show next week, and I think we will because it'll be a few days deep into free agency, I will be back at my typical computer. I will be back in my normal setup, so it should go a little bit better. Just so everybody knows that.
All right, thank you, bro.
Not a problem. Okay, so next up, we're going to move to your number 8 guy here. And I'll tell you this guy's on my list too. We'll get to him on my list as well. But Calais Campbell, the 39-year-old ageless wonder defensive tackle, most recently with the Miami Dolphins, but he's played on every team. Let's be real here.
Yeah, I don't know how feasible it'll be for a couple of reasons. I've wondered if he's a guy that does want to play more East Coast as he's aged. This is a guy that John Schneider, though, that we know has had a long affinity for, that he has drafted many a player, I think, over looking to kind of capture that Calais Campbell model of player and find that guy, not been able to do it. And Calais Campbell has, meanwhile, even though he is very old, has continued to play at a really high level. Now, is his snap count going to have to be reduced down much more than ever before? Sure. But is he still a guy that can move all over that defensive line and can play at all of those different positions and is still very effective on the field when you put him out there? I think he was still one of the better run defending defensive tackles in the sport last year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's going to cost a lot. I think you're only going to be able to make this move if you do sort of retain a DK and a Geno, and you're making go for it kind of moves to indicate to Calais that he can come play for a contender. I don't think he's going to want to come play for a rebuild kind of team. But if you are trying to push in that way, this is a signing that would make a lot of sense to me as far as you can work him in there and he's going to be a benefit to this team.
Yeah. So Spotrac has Calais Campbell as a market value page, and they say 1 year, $7 million, but we all know he's not going to get that. But what they're saying is that's what he's worth based on his ability. You know, it's going to be 1 year, $3 million at most because he's so old. So you're getting a player who is worth way more than what you're going to actually have to give him, which is obviously great.
I think I could see him make either probably into even a $5 million territory off the year
He
he
got
had
2
last year.
last year, and he had a
Oh,
great
did
year
he?
the previous year.
Jeez.
Yeah, he got 1 year, $2 million from Miami.
Okay. I didn't realize he was only got paid that low on it. So, okay. Yeah, you might be right then.
Yeah, did your cat just give you that cup of coffee? That's what it looked like on the
I
webcam.
had somebody else, I had somebody hand it to me here.
Okay, it looked like the cat, which would be really cool. My dog.
What do you call it? Little dot comes in.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah. All right. My number 8 is kind of a curveball. It's a little bit out there, I will grant you, but bear with me here. Khalil Mack. Dude had an awesome year last year. One of the best all-around edge players in the league. 2 years ago, he almost won Defensive Player of the Year. He had like 17 sacks. He's probably at the age now where he needs to reduce his snap count a little bit. What I'm saying is if he's at the point now where you could get him at a little bit of a reduced rate because of his age and because of what he needs to be successful now, and he's also somebody who's willing to maybe play like 30, 35 snaps a game at most, you would get such good stuff out of him. I think he really would make this defense a lot better. It's a little crazy, but I really like Khalil Mack.
Are you still making that signing if you're with the restructure of Uchenna?
Well, let me think here because it's Nwosu, Mafe, Hall. Admittedly, the Nwosu restructure does change things a little bit, but you still need that fourth edge. And yeah, you could say maybe the fourth edge can be kind of a throwaway player, but maybe
who's going to be your
right?
power edge then?
Who's going to be your power edge? Yeah, that you don't really have one in that case, right? You just have to tell McDonald we'll get one later. We can't do it right now.
That's my thing. I mean, I see the thinking behind Khalil Mack if you had released Uchenna, but I also think that this is that thing where this is why the restructure of Uchenna comes in, because you eat the dead money of Uchenna, then you have to give Khalil Mack more money, then you end up spending more money on that edge than you were going to spend by just keeping Uchenna on the original contract. And then with Khalil, like you say, you're getting a guy that you're going to have to play on more of a reduced snap count and a guy that's not the power edge, long, big, heavy that we know Mike McDonald's looking for on that side.
Yeah.
That would be
in
just
my
the thing.
defense, I put together this list before the restructure.
Yeah. And I think there was a lot of reason to believe in anticipation that Uchenna was not going to restructure and that there was more likely that they were just going to do the pure release.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Your number 7 was, this one would create a lot of confusion, which might be half the fun. Byron Murphy, the other Byron Murphy, the cornerback most recently with the Vikings, had a real nice year in 2024. So you want to bring him home? This is maybe your homer pick because he's
you got a UW. I get a UW. That's the way this works. If we're Husky fans, man, we all get to have at least one Husky on our free agent list. I had Gaines too, by the way. So I beat you, Mr. Husky Homer. I beat your loyalty factor.
I thought about Gaines too. Actually,
some of us are real Husky fans, and some of us are partial Husky fans.
Yeah.
Byron is he's become a really good player. He's just a really solid, steady player. I think he had 6 interceptions last year, so brought some ball skills into play. You need corner help. I don't know if he's going to keep Rick Woolen or not. If you wanted to move Rick Woolen's $5 million contract and sign a Byron Murphy, probably the first year cap hit for Byron Murphy is going to be right around that cap hit cost that you'd have to spend for a Rick Woolen. So just a player that I like, and I think he's really developed and come on as a guy heading into his prime, had a great year for Minnesota. But just kind of was filling out the list to a degree.
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty darn expensive is the thing. And also I'm a little concerned that last year was kind of his breakout year. And I think maybe he broke out because of the aura of Brian Flores. I think that aura, like he leaves the aura, you might not get the same results.
Could be.
Mm-hmm. But pretty good idea. It's something that I played with as well. All right. My number 7 on my list is Aaron Banks, the left guard from San Francisco. Little bit wary of the Shanahan offensive linemen. Little bit wary of these guys that are playing right next to Trent Williams, who might be the best left tackle of his generation. But I think there's enough here to like. I think there's enough to get into to where you say, I'll throw caution to the wind a little bit here because I think he's good. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money, although they're saying he might. And he's young. He's played a lot of football over the last few years. I think you can make it work.
I think he's a 3-year, $24 million player, so I don't think he'll get a little bit of money, but I don't think he's had enough of a performance as a baseline to get a lot of money. He knows the scheme. he comes in and he's going to understand what he needs to do instantaneously in this zone system. He's a fit that way. He's not a block sustainer. He's a guy that's going to get the block initially on and give you that initial moment of sealing up the block. And especially if you have those explosive fast backs that don't need a block sustained for a long period of time to get through the hole, it can work really well. Not as much as going to be as good as a pass protector, but a guy that's functional. It's not going to be super expensive, an upgrade over what you've currently had there recently in recent memory, and younger than what you've had there in recent memory. So he's on my list too. I think it's 6.
Yeah, he's right. I like the next guy literally on your list.
So I could see them looking at this as a possible signing where you're getting an upgrade. You're spending some money, but you're not going over the top like you would have to with some of the bigger free agent offensive linemen in this class.
Yeah. I think Spotrek had 3 for $29, which I could see offensive linemen always get more than we expect, I think, because they're so valuable. And I would be fine with that. Like, I'm not going to pinch pennies when I'm trying to fix this thing that I've been trying to fix for a while.
Agreed.
All right. So that was your number 6. So now we go to my number 6. Azeez Ojulari, edge rusher from the Giants. Never really broke out in New York, couldn't really quite stay on the field reliably. This is like a reclamation project for McDonald. And again, this probably made more sense before we restructured Nwosu, but whatever. I like Ojulari, a lot of talent, just hasn't been able to stay healthy lately. And I think McDonald would have fun trying to get him back to where we thought he was going to be coming out, because that rookie year was probably his best year so far. So just like a reclamation project, wouldn't cost a ton, and he would round out the edge room. You wouldn't ask a ton of him in his first year anyway.
No, he was a real fun player coming out. Injuries have just been the big problem. They've been a major problem for him, where it's just he's dealing with something constantly, it seems like, as far as injury goes. He just can't get out on the football field, but wouldn't cost you a lot because of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, your number 5. Number 5 on your list is Tevin Jenkins, left guard from the Chicago Bears.
Tevin Jenkins. A little bit of injury risk with this guy. Tackle convert to guards from college with Oklahoma State. So he has the athleticism and movement ability you want from the inside there at this position. He's big. He's a finisher. He's mean. It's really just the injury side of it. And he's going to cost a bit of money, but it's not going to be, I think, anywhere near the same stratosphere as what you'll get with the Trey Smith or Drew Dahlman. So I just think this guy would be as good a left guard than we have seen if you signed him than we've had since maybe going back to Steve Hutchinson.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know the injuries are a little bit of a concern, but he's played really well when he's been on the field. And let's face it, if he wasn't an injury risk, if he wasn't somebody who had missed a little bit of time over the last few years, I don't think the Bears let him leave the building. I think this is the only reason why he's available. So you trying to find a perfect player is going to end with you not getting anything, because they all get retained by their teams.
Especially offensive linemen.
Mm-hmm. All right, my number 5, this is a guy I mentioned a little bit earlier, Josh Palmer, wide receiver from the Chargers. This would have worked a little bit better if we kept Metcalf, which we still could, I guess. So the idea is he's kind of your number 3 receiver now. You have DK, you have JSN. He's the guy who doesn't play a ton, but he offers a good amount of stuff. I liked him in college. I've liked him so far with the Chargers. He's never been that number 1 receiver. I think here he would be like a pretty good number 3 receiver, somebody who doesn't play any more than 60% of the snaps, but he's doing his thing. He's doing good work when he's out there for whatever Kubiak gives him. I think that's kind of like, by the way, Spotrac said like 3 years, 12.8 million. So that's barely over 4 million a year. So it would be cheap too, and multi-year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would be I'd probably be a bit against this, but that's as much just, I'm not looking to spend as much money in the receiver. And if I'm going to spend it, I want to get something in here that's legitimate. With Palmer, I think he's kind of just a guy a little bit in where he is. And even at $4 million, you are kind of paying $4 million for just a guy. I think I can find a Josh Palmer in this draft in the 4th round with that skill set and get away with it a lot cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, that first year cap hit would be a lot less than 4 million for whatever that's worth. So
yeah,
that's kind of how I'm thinking about it as well.
I just look at it like the receiver and the running back position right now are ones where, like I say, we should target those positions to be ones where if we can find a way to put less money into those positions, we should do so. Not that we don't put any money into it, but that we should be kind of careful in how we do it and what resources we put into that. And because it's just not as driven offensively in the needs of this team. You need receivers, but you just don't want to be overthrowing too much. And let's keep in mind, signing Josh, if you sign DK, you've still got the dead money that you're sitting on then from the from the Tyler Lockett move. You have a first round contract with JSN on the books. In addition to this, that you're spending pretty good money on that with him there. So it's not like this thing has been a cheap positional group just with Tyler retiring, if you do still keep DK Metcalf in the fold on it.
Right. All right. Your number 4, and this is a guy that I thought about as well. Mekhi Becton, right guard of the Eagles, Super Bowl champion Mekhi Becton. Colossal bust in New York, went to the Eagles, changed positions, and found new life.
Yep. Tackle convert to guard like Tevin Jenkins. These are what you're looking for in this system to get the mobile guys that can hit those reach blocks, that can move laterally post snap and do so comfortably. I think that what he did last year was legitimate. I think that he's a big man that would work really well inside, move people off the ball, help your running game out substantially inside in there. I think that they're probably going to end up retaining him. It seems like the Eagles are going to, they value linemen. They don't let offensive linemen go. I don't think they're going to let him walk necessarily, but they haven't gotten a deal done yet with him. And so until they do, he's on my list.
Yeah, I do wonder if they feel like he's looks much better than he is because he gets to play next to Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens and Jordan Maitaya. I do wonder if maybe they view him as like the expendable part, and it wouldn't shock me if that's the case.
Especially being right guard, which is kind of that is the low end offensive line spot of the 5 positions.
Yeah, I could see him coming to Seattle and then not looking nearly as good as he did in Philly because we don't have future Hall of Fame guys put around him. So I'm a little bit concerned about that one, but I get the appeal totally.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. All right. My number 4 is also an offensive lineman. It's Ryan Kelly from the Colts. I'm a little bit wary about the age, a little bit wary about the fact that it'd probably be a short-term deal with more money up front. But at a certain point, I think you just need to make this position better. And Ryan Kelly would make the position a lot better. I think he's still a really good player. I know he's missed a little bit of time lately, but he's had a great career. And he would offer legitimacy to this offensive line that we haven't had in a while.
Indeed. My guy was number 3 on my list, and a guy that you're right about the age. You're a little bit concerned there, but that 32 is not ancient for centers. You still feel like you get 2 to 3 years of good play out of him, and this would be a monstrous upgrade over what you've had at the center position going back to Max Unger. And some of these guys we reference, whether it's a Steve Hutchinson or Max Unger, it's like we're 10 years back from finding a player this good, and that makes it that much more of a priority. And you can see how that could have so much more of an impact if you bring that kind of player in.
Yeah, he was number 3 on your list, by the way. So you are correct. He was definitely there. I'm a little uneasy about it, but you have to take a leap of faith at some point with some of these guys. You just do.
Well, it's Drew Dahlman, and it's Drew Dahlman. I know we mentioned Brady Christensen, but it's basically if you want real upgrades, it's Dahlman and this guy, and if it, at the center position specifically. And if it's not that, then you're looking to the draft. And right now, my draft, I don't have a center higher than the 4th round on my valuation right now. So
we're going to need one of these guys to move to center, and I don't know who that is.
Yeah. So the lay of the land thing is kind of such that does drive some of this too, as far as some of the scarcity of the market and what you do get from Ryan, and that he is a good player at that center position.
And my number 3 was Calais Campbell, who we already talked about, but it would just be awesome to have Calais Campbell. He's such a cool guy. Playing
great for
39
veteran.
years old. Yeah.
Can't beat the veteran leadership. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, he's 39 years old and he's still one of the best players in the league. I want a part of that, man.
And the veteran presence you bring in with him, having guys like Uchenna Nwosu, Leonard Williams, this guy in your defensive line, the guidance and leadership that gives you on that line, I think is huge.
Mm-hmm. All right. We both have the same number 2 guy. It's Drew Dahlman. You had him at number 2. I had him at number 2. So we're in alignment here. I didn't put him at number 1, but I think he's pretty clearly like the perfect guy to target. Like there's really nothing anybody could criticize on him in terms of a Seahawks target.
Yeah, he becomes basically my number 1 guy now that my number 1 guy has been taken off the board a little bit. I think most people are very aware of Drew Dahlman at this point. It's going to cost $20 million a year probably to sign him, but I don't care. That's especially if we are going for it. If we're not going for it, maybe it's a little bit different here, but if you are going for it, especially, this should be a center point signing to begin your offseason, to start to not have to set the stage where everything's going to be the hard work needing to get done by the time you get to the draft, that you get some of the work done ahead of the draft, and not with also ran players or veterans on their last leg, Brendan, but actually true value.
Yeah. Spotrac said 8 million a year, so keep John Schneider off Spotrac for a while, because if he sees that, he's gonna get conceptions in his head.
No, Spotrac's completely off on this one. He's
Yeah,
going to
I
make
know.
it's Creed Humphrey's contract's the baseline, and he's making more than Creed on it, and especially the cap increases. So especially with the teams that'll be out there bidding for his services.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't know if it gets up that high because he doesn't have the rep of Creed. Like Creed was playing in Super Bowls constantly to start his career. There is a level of credibility you gain from that as a player that isn't entirely fair. So I do wonder if that perception will end up matching up with that. But in terms of his ability, I kind of agree. He should be up there. He's really good. I don't think he's had any significant injuries yet in his career. He's young.
Mm-hmm.
He could get better next year, by the way, easily.
Yeah, well, he's been an offense that hasn't exactly always had things good to go with since he's been there. Like as far as the quarterback or the coaching. So yeah, there's room to where he goes to a better environment, a better team, and that you even get a better player.
All right. Your number one was Trey Smith, which has now been tagged. I don't think that. I guess we can't completely take him off the board. You could trade for him and then sign him, but it's a lot less fun.
I think the Thuney thing shows you that what the intention here from the Chiefs' standpoint is to sign Trey Smith to an extension and then deal with left tackle, left guard. That seems to be their approach here. And it's not just franchising him to move him, but to franchise him to sign him.
Yeah, and Kingsley's going to be either the tackle or guard, so then they just have to worry about the other one. It makes sense. It works. Who's their Jawan Taylor's still their right tackle, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Right. So pretty much taken away. And I guess that's okay. I'm not enamored with the idea of throwing more than 20 million at a right guard in general. But man, he was just perfect. He played every game. He was well graded every year. His numbers were great every year. He was just the perfect. He was as good as you can get for that position at this point.
Indeed, he was. It would be a home run signing if you could find a way to make it work. So sucks that he's off the board, but he's a legit player.
And my number one was Tevin Jenkins, who we already talked about, so I don't need to go too much into that.
I like me some Tevin, man. Be great to come out of this free agent period. If you get Dahlman and Tevin Jenkins, that'd be, again, especially if you're really in contend, that'd be the dream.
Okay, so that is all of our free agency stuff. Those are the guys we're really gearing up for right now. Again, we need to pick a path here. If we decide to go the other way, the way that you're talking about, which is, taking it easy in 2025, I don't have any real specific names. Just, take it easy, give out small deals, give out short-term deals, and just you're basically just trying to field a capable team and not worrying so much about pushing the edge, right?
100%. It's just then about kind of just you get it into next year a little bit. And if you can roll money over even, I think is an ideal situation because you really set the stage in doing that to be able to build up in a big way and hit at the right time. So I would take that approach if they're going to peel. It's kind of one to the other. You go from DK, then Geno should go too. And if those go, then probably more just to take a patient kind of year in the way that you're at it. And don't know what they're doing quite yet, Brendan. We just do not know which way they're exactly going to go from the route standpoint of it. We'll know within the week. This Geno and DK thing will come down and we'll have a resolution by the time we get to Monday next week.
Yeah, if we don't, that's really bad. Like if we do not have this resolved by Monday morning, that's really, really bad. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, not a good sign. The longer the DK drags on, the less returns I think you get from him. I don't think you take this 3 weeks down the line and you're getting your first and third round pick at that point. I think instead it's more like closer to Josina Anderson's third round pick if you're waiting that long. And Geno much of the same way. Teams that need quarterbacks right now are going to want to make that move. That's going to make that move, or you sign the extension. So Seahawks got to Esther get off the pot. They got to decide what they want to do with this. You push this thing as far as you can, as far as holding off to making you determined about what you're going to intend to do. So now you got to actually make a choice and pick a road.
All right. So there's one other thing that we should cover real quick here. And I know this, it feels like this happened 3 years ago now because of all the stuff that's happened since. We did have a combine last week. We did have a combine and it was very interesting, very illuminating, a lot of fun. I always love watching the combine every year. And there are some guys that boost their stock up, and then there are some guys that take their stock down with the way they perform. So let's briefly go over some of our favorites. And there's a lot of overlap here because the combine is kind of objective, right? Like either you do well or you don't do well, and everybody can see it.
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and go through some guys. You had 10 risers. First guy, edge rusher Shamar Stewart, runs a 4.59 40, 1.58 10-yard split. This is a bigger edge, by the way. This is not like a typical edge. This is not a James Pierce. So you might look at those times and say they're not that good. They are for him. 40-inch vert, which is insane, and then 10-foot 11-inch broad, which is also insane.
Yeah, he absolutely had an insane combine that legitimized himself as potentially being a first round talent. I don't with these guys. I think it's great that they've had this combine like they have. I don't think they should elevate past the tape or raise you past the tape on that, in my opinion. And so I still do hold him into being a very high second round pick. You are drafting a guy that's more about the tools than you're drafting him for production. But there's no doubt he put up basically Myles Garrett type numbers, and that's legitimate. And that's worth noting.
Is there not a little bit of LJ Collier here, because LJ Collier was a guy who didn't produce in college and then set the world on fire at the Senior Bowl? Like, is there not a little bit of that here?
No, because LJ Collier's numbers, if you go look at him from a testing standpoint, are nowhere near these numbers. Not even in the stadium of these numbers.
Yeah, I agree with that, but still, the guy who didn't do anything in college and then after college is over, he starts doing good things. It still made me think of Collier, and I'm like, I'm sick of doing the Senior Bowl thing, because I remember this guy was great at the Senior Bowl too.
Yeah, I don't want that stuff to override. And you're right about LJ with the Senior Bowl. That overrid a lot of what was with him as a player. Like Seattle let that carry the day on him in a way that they shouldn't have. But I mean, just to put this in perspective, I'm bringing up the numbers right now. LJ Collier ran a 4.91 40. LJ Collier had a 1.68 10-yard split. LJ Collier had a 9.10 broad jump. So this guy's numbers, he jumped 30 inches. LJ Collier 30 inches was his vertical leap. So we're talking about there, yes, from a production standpoint, there's an equivalency there, but from size, length, explosiveness, I mean, any metric you want to basically use, Shamar is lapping him over and over again. As far as this, part of why I hate the Collier pick so much is that you weren't even drafting a guy with tools in the first round. You weren't drafting a guy with production in the first round. You were drafting the guy literally just because of that Senior Bowl performance.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Shamar Stewart, very intriguing. Second guy is Maxwell Hairston, cornerback. What was this? Kentucky? Yeah, Kentucky. Ran a 4.28 40, 1.5 flat 10-yard split, 39.5-inch vert, 10-foot 9-inch broad. He's a smaller guy, a little bit shorter armed, but he definitely did himself some favors this week.
Yes, he did. He's the cool thing with him too is the speed does show up on tape. You especially see it when he wants to do the makeup speed, when he loses a little bit of space between him and the receiver, that he can make that up really almost effortlessly at times. His tape is not great as far as tackling goes. He doesn't want to tackle for nothing, but he can cover and he can run. And that's the main first two things you really look for when you're looking for a cornerback.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he plays on the outside in the NFL, or do you think he's going to be relegated to slot?
I tend to think that he's going to play on the outside with that speed. That's enough. That's enough next level burst with it to where he can overcome some things. But you do worry a little bit about the arm length. I think they're a little bit with him. He's 6, he's over 6 foot, so he's got enough size, I think, to get it done.
All right. Number 3 on your list, edge rusher James Pierce. And this is the one that everyone kind of knew about after that 40 time he ran 4.47 as an edge rusher. He is a little on the smaller side for an edge rusher. He's like 245, but he's not critically small. 1.56 10-yard split, 31-inch vert, 10-foot 3-inch broad. So not tremendous jumps, but the speed is going to get people's attention all day.
Some questions too with him on maybe character. They may or may not be legit. There are some questions there. I have him as currently my 3rd edge on my peck, or my 4th edge on my pecking order. I do have Jalen Walker ahead of Pierce. Mainly just because I like Walker as the weapon piece in this defense and using him in a variety of places, including off-ball linebacker. I think Pierce is more going to be a kind of a rotational pass rusher who is really good as a pass rusher. I don't know necessarily if he's going to be as good in the run as he is against the pass, but definitely helped himself to probably, if the character concerns are clean, stabilize himself in the top 20 picks.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree there. A little bit concerned about his ability to play the run, but definitely exciting as a pass rusher for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. You also had defensive tackle here, Derek Harmon, Oregon, 4.9540, 1.74 10-yard split.
Pure three technician inside, but these are the numbers that you were only a little worried about off the tape of whether or not he would have enough juice athletically. And so this does show you, it's not that you're looking for the numbers to blow you away here with that his size and weight that he is at, so that you just want to see that kind of get under the 5 flat, give me a respectable 10-yard split. And that paired up with how you use your hands on tape with your plan of attack as a pass rusher will be enough to legitimize you now as a first round talent.
Right. And he's decent sized as well. He's 313 pounds. This is not like Braden Fisk or anything like that. This is a legitimately sized 3 tech.
Very similar testing times to Chris Jones. Very, very almost just the same thing with Myles Garrett to Shamar Stewart as far as testing goes, is the same mirroring that you can do between a Derek Harmon and a Chris Jones. I don't think it'll be as good as Chris, but Chris was also a second round talent.
Right. So I haven't seen a lot of him in the first round, so I wouldn't be surprised if he fell to that second. That would be, probably about what I expect at this point.
It's possible. I think if he goes in the first, it will be dipping into the 20s of where he goes to /30. So he isn't a top 20 type first if he does go in the first. But I think he's done enough with this. I think teams with looking at the Chris Jones comps and with the production, the guy was a pressure machine. I don't think there's a 3 tech in this draft who's got more pressures from the inside than what Harmon caused last year.
All right. Next up on your list was offensive lineman Armand Membo. Offensive lineman, big dude, runs a 4.9140, which should be illegal given how big he is. He's like 330 something. Yep. 1.74 10-yard split, 34-inch vert, 9 foot 7-inch broad, which I think came very close to setting records given his size. And he also cranked out 31 bench press reps. So whatever you wanted him to do, he did.
Yeah, unfortunately, he probably had too good of a combine to take him off of Seattle's board as a possibility. Probably is going to go now in the top 10. Might be the first tackle taken off the board at this point. He was this year's J.C. Latham for me, Brendan, where we knew Seattle would probably take Latham if they had Latham and Murphy both on their board last year in the first round. They didn't. Latham went before Murphy. This year, if this guy was there, I think this is a guy the Hawks would target because you got the insurance for Lucas, and then you have a guy that can play in at guard. The 31 bench press reps show the strength that you see with him on tape. That should easily transition inside. He's not 6'6", where he's super tall. You worry about the ability to get in there and win the leverage war. But unfortunately, these testing times are probably going to put him at the very least in the top 12, if not the top 10.
Yeah, and you always want to be prepared. You never know what might happen. They might get the video of him with the gas mask and the.
You never know, man. You never know. You gotta be aware.
Right.
Keep on your toes.
Yeah, absolute freak though. Let's see here. This next guy, wide receiver Matthew Golden, mostly just that 40 time, but it was a heck of a 40 time. 4.29, 1.49 10-yard split. So it's not quite Xavier Worthy, but it is really, really good.
Better player than Xavier Worthy, I'll tell you that. And this kid, he is really, really good with the route running. So when you get a guy that is this fast, whose route running is that good, that's where the evaluation starts to get pretty easy as long as his hands are capable. And that there's not some great deficiency to his game on the other side of it. And there is not with Golden. I don't think that he has the sparkling aspects to him as far as great contested catcher, great high pointer, the awesome pure yak guy. He gives you some of that stuff down the line, but the speed in combination with the route running and the steady hands in addition to that gives you a guy that I think gives you a pretty safe floor for what you get from as a receiver in the first round, where maybe the ceiling isn't quite as huge, but you're getting to that floor.
Do you think he's an outside receiver or slot receiver?
He's a Z. He'll be an outside Z, but he'll be a guy that can kick in occasionally into the slot.
Okay. That's pretty sweet then. That works out fairly well, I think.
Yeah.
I know there's that one Texas receiver that some people like. Is it Bond?
I'm really cooling on Bond the more tape that I watch of Bond.
Yeah, I know some people were rallying around Bond. I didn't like what I saw that much, but yeah.
Just I'm left wanting more from him with the tape, and he just seems like kind of an explosive, undersized guy, and I that's kind of just his thing, and I don't know if there's a lot I can work with on that with Bond, to be honest with you.
Okay, your next guy was a star, Darian Porter, cornerback. And the thing to understand with Darian Porter is how big he is. We're not just talking about this crazy good 40, 4.3 flat, 1.49 10-yard split, 36.5-inch vert, 10-foot 11-inch broad. He did 6.71 on the 3-cone and a 4.04 on the 20-yard shuttle, which you don't see that often. And this is a bigger corner, by the way. This is not some 180-pound guy. This is a legitimate. Let me check the numbers here real quick. Yeah, 6'3", 195 with 33 and an 1/8-inch arms. So he is the resident freak this year, I think.
He is a guy that you've got to take a bit of a risk on, and not a lot of snaps that he's played. I was looking at my notes here. So here, interesting enough with him, he was only targeted 17 times. And this is what you see with him on the tape as well, is that he's just rarely targeted. It's hard to watch much tape with him because when he is on there, number one, he only played about 200 snaps this year in coverage. So you don't have a lot of snaps to go off of, but he was very rarely targeted with only 17 times. He only gave up 70 yards in coverage, Brendan. And you and I have been tracking corners. You know, these guys tend to be around 300, 400, 500 yards given up in coverage, depending on where they're at. So that's tremendous numbers. But again, that's only on 200 snaps. And then the previous year gave up 61 yards in coverage, but that was only on 72 snaps. So your amount of time this guy's actually played and been on the field and actually been doing a lot, it's reduced down. That's the risk you have. But the freak show element, as far as what he brought from a testing time spot, that part is legit. But he's going to be a tough evaluation for those because you don't have necessarily the tape to go off of with him. It's going to be a lot of imagination.
Right. But a lot of fun. Could be this year's Reek Woolen.
Absolutely.
Except I think he's a little bit better.
There's a different Reek Woolen this year. That's the Zaw Frazier kid.
Yeah,
he comes from UTSA, so he comes from the very same college of Tariq Woolen, same size as Reek. Guy ran a 4.3, so it's very similar. Long arms, doesn't like to wrap up, likes to shoulder tackle. He's your shoulder sticker.
All right, this next one I got no idea how to pronounce, so we're gonna just have to do the best that we can here. Bial-Shul Tuten. Bial-Shul Tuten. A running back, ran a 4.3 240, 1.49 10-yard split. So speed and acceleration, 40.5-inch vert, 10-foot 10-inch broad. So he's got explosiveness. 4.41 20-yard shuttle isn't the greatest, but it's still totally fine. So this guy tested expertly.
He did. And last year ran for 1,300 yards with a leg injury. So a guy to track because you have a really deep running back class. This guy goes deeper in the draft. The tape last year, you'll look at and you'll go, well, I like the tape, I don't love the tape, but he's dragging that leg along. It was like watching Kurt Warner back in '88 after he tore his ACL at times, watching him pull it along. My understanding is that he's back to 100%. It's why partially he tested so well into this draft. So you're looking at it as a guy that you're getting a bit of a diamond that's a bit of depressed value because of that final season, but still ran for 1,300 yards, dragging that one leg along with him.
Right. And he's almost got like the Maurice Jones-Drew center of gravity. He's 5'9", but 206 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of that little center of gravity, built low to the ground, runs real well behind his pads. Okay, again, you're getting more 5th, 6th round guy, but that to me is going to be a really good value for a guy that be your 4th running back on your roster with this kind of explosiveness.
Absolutely. Another offensive lineman here, another freak offensive lineman. I think this guy's like 335. Ariante Ursary of the Golden Gophers. They produce offensive linemen like this a lot, I feel like, because remember Daniel Falele?
That's right.
There.
You got the center also. Remember Schmitz?
Yeah.
John Michael Schmitz came out there.
Mm-hmm.
They produce some.
Yeah.
The 330 is the important part with this, man. So it's just like, it's a little bit of like a lesser degree of Armand Mabou, where you've got a guy at 330 that shouldn't move this fast. And with his size and boy, he's wide as a house. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of confidence between him and Mabou about being able to push these guys inside 25 bench press reps, nice long arms that he's got on him as well. I think that this really leads me to believe this could be a guy that you could go take even at 18 who could be giving you that inside outside flexibility. So it's like a lesser Mabou, but still a guy with a lot of upside there. Like Mabou, Irsay and him too. These guys are really young. Mabou's like 20 years old. So you got guys with you have a lot of belief in your heart in taking these guys that the upside's going to be there in addition to these testing times. They're almost like the testing times are giving you a bit of a a peek into that upside that does really exist there with these guys being this young.
Absolutely. Big fan anniversary, especially after this as well. And the final guy is kind of the guy that is burned into our memories the best right now, because this was kind of one of the last big hurrahs of the combine. It felt like in a way, it felt like this, well, not last, but biggest, excuse me. Nick Emanwari, the safety, who really went out there and just basically set records, runs a 4.38 as a safety, 1.49 10-yard split, 43-inch vert, which I think literally is a record for a safety. 11 foot 6-inch broad, I think, is also a record, and 20 bench press reps as a 220-pound guy. This is not a small safety. So he passed every test you could want from a safety prospect at the combine, I think.
Yeah, the tape doesn't really match up to the testing times. And that's where I struggle with this, because there's a lot of Hawk fans that are instantaneously on the take him at 18. That's good value than to take him at 18. And you're drafting more traits. This is why I have Shamar Stewart in the second round too. These are guys with great traits. That's undeniable, but you're not getting the production with it. And maybe they get to that, reach that upside with that production. But when I go to take a guy in the first round, I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this one. But when I do go to get a first guy in the first round, I want to go beyond more than just traits. Maybe if I'm in the deep 20s, I'll go with traits. But if I'm sitting more mid-teens, I kind of want to get what I know what I'm getting a little bit more so on that. And with Emanwari, I've gone back and watched the tape a couple times now. I've got all 22 available to me now. I've been watching with him. And I keep coming back away going, his tape is fine. It's a second round player, but you're not a first round guy. I can't go there with him.
I'm a little, excuse me.
Bless you.
Where'd that come from? I'm a little more open to it than you are, I think, because I don't think he was, a forgettable player. To me, it's not like Shamar Stewart, who didn't really produce at all in college. Emanwari just didn't produce as much as somebody like a Malachi Starks. And, I want to be a little open-minded to this stuff. Emanwari's playing on a South Carolina team that doesn't have nearly as much talent around him as he would have had at Georgia, where Starks was. So I'm a little more open to it. It's still not my favorite option. Some people are really rallying behind it. You're right. Some Seahawks fans are going crazy for Emanwari, but I'm a little more open to it than you are, I think. Still not.
Safeties just don't go in the first round. And if they're going to go in the first round like this, an Earl Thomas that went in the first round, who I know was smaller than Emanwari, had a lot better production with Texas coming out. There was a lot more of the ball skills at play and ability to take away the ball from the safety position and be, in general, you felt the speed on the field. That 4.3 speed of Earl, you felt that with him with Texas. You could see him in the center field going end to end. I don't quite get that same feeling of Nick when I watch the tape. And that we're talking about taking Nick in a lot closer to a place of Earl than we are talking about taking him further away than when we took Earl. And I just don't think that quite matches up. There's better picks to be made at that point, and you're drafting more to the traits at that point. To me, this gets driven at that point, not by the tape. It gets driven by the combine. And that's where I think you got to be careful.
Okay. Yeah. Really fun though. Really fun player.
Yeah. He's fun. And maybe the upside's there. Like, you just got to be sure if you take him, Brendan, that you're going to get him to that upside. It can't be like, well, we kind of think. We got to know you've got your plan to get him there and how you're going to use him in that way.
All right. I got one more guy I want to throw in here. It wasn't on your list, but I want to throw him in here, especially now. Dante Thornton Jr., the wide receiver. Tennessee guy, 6'5", so he's tall. He's taller than Metcalf. Ran a 4.3 flat, 1.51 10-yard split. The jumps weren't so great, but the combination of size and speed definitely jumped out to me. It jumped off the page. So I definitely want to give him a shout out here.
It's a play. I haven't had a chance to take a look at his tape yet, but those are great times.
Yeah. The Tennessee stuff's weird, right? Because the way they play offense, it's like easy mode for receivers sometimes. You never get jammed.
It's one of the more adolescent offenses you find in college football.
There were a few others too, but I think that's really about all we have to say about the risers. I did think Jackson Dart looked pretty good, but I'm still not a fan. I'm still not into it. To me, he'll just be like a noodle arm, decent starting quarterback, and that's about it. But he did play well at the combine, I thought.
Yeah, he looked all right. I would have liked to have seen him run. I think that's a guy you're really wanting to pay attention to where he times out as far as his 40 time goes, because I think he is more 4.65 kind of guy on the 40. But third round guy again. This is another, just don't take him in the first. It's too high to be taken in the first. Let some other team make that mistake.
All right. Real quick here, you have a few combine fallers, guys who did not do themselves any favors with their performance. You got 6 guys, so let's just go through them real quick here. First guy, this one was kind of obvious. This one, I think everybody realized something's up here. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, moves like a slug, 5.38 with a 1.96 10-yard split, which I don't know if I've ever seen a 10-yard split up above 2 seconds, but this guy got close. 27-inch vert, 7 foot 10-inch broad, so he's also got no explosiveness. 7.96 3-cone and 4.84 10-yard shuttles, okay, I guess. And 21 bench press reps was actually closer to the bottom than the top. All you can say about Booker is that he came in pretty big. He was like 321, so he's got legitimate size and long arms. Other than that, it was kind of a dud.
Was a dud of a performance. I think that he is still going to end up going in the first round, surprisingly enough. His reputation is really high league circle wise, and people love him as a leader, and they're going to look past these testing times, but they are eye-opening testing. Those are real bad scores across the board. I mean, Nick Emawari did 20 bench press reps at 220. This guy did one more, weighing 100 more pounds than him, to put that in perspective. Now, the arms are longer on a Booker, but it wasn't like Emawari had short arms either. I still think Booker to me is a second round graded talent. I wouldn't want to take him in the first round, but my bold take for this is he will still go in the first round because number one, the tape is really good on him at the end of the day. But then number two, you hear a lot about him as a leader, and you kind of get sort of the Trey Smith vibes from him, as far as the way people talk about him a little bit, from kind of the neck up and how he carries himself.
Yeah, the thing for me is I feel like he didn't even have that great of a season at Alabama. Like, he was okay. I didn't get some amazing sense of what he did at Alabama this last year. So I don't know. To me, he needed to test well, and he just didn't. Like, I need to have something to sink my teeth into here, and I'm not getting it.
It's fair enough. They're not good scores. I mean, they're about as bad as you get from a top end prospect.
Yeah, and like Corbin was defending him a lot. He was saying, "Trust me, he can play zone. He can play zone because you watch the tape. He plays zone." I mean, is he going to be able to play zone at the NFL level is my question. I understand maybe on the tape it looks like he can at Alabama when he's playing, Tennessee Chattanooga or something. But I don't know. I'm pretty shaky on this one now. I got to admit.
I can understand the shakiness on it. He's my third guard. I've got Kelvin Banks first round grade. I've got Grace Abel guard center is ahead of him, and then I'd have him as my third guy. But I did like the tape. I'm in an alignment with Corbin on this one, where I think the tape is very clean, and I think that I know what I'm getting in him. I think that he fits the zone scheme. I don't think he's ultimately as mobile as you'd maybe like, but when you turn on the tape, he's a gamer and he gets the job done. And that's kind of good enough. I think that this is a guy that gives you a pretty high floor. You may not have the ultimately the huge ceiling, where he's going to be some all-pro level guy. But I think that he does give you some pretty meat and potatoes ability to get in there and be ready to roll.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next combine faller would be another offensive lineman, Wyatt Millam, the West Virginia guy. I've been watching him all year. Tested poorly, 5.27, 41.84, 10-yard split, 30-inch vert, 9-foot broad, which is actually a lot better than Tyler Booker, but it's still not great. 4.69, 10, 20-yard shuttle. He seems meant to be a mauler offensive lineman to me, but he really didn't look like it at the Senior Bowl either. So now I'm not so sure what I think of him.
Yeah, it's kind of on top of the testing scores. Didn't exactly look particularly good movement-wise, where a guy like Grace Abel, coming from a small school as well, looked good in his movement and mobility drills. And so with Millam, you're really paying attention to these kind of guys. I know West Virginia is not a small school, but just competition-wise, I guess, as much as anything else. I thought he was kind of disappointing overall in that you want to see a little bit more from Wyatt on that. He's going to be a guard, so the numbers aren't incredible, but they're in the vicinity of where kind of Booker is to a degree for a guy that is in that same second round graded territory of things.
Yeah, because I watched all the offensive lineman drills, not just the stuff that's measured by like a time or whatever. And some of the guys look top heavy, and some of them don't. You can really just tell.
Yep. Yeah, you can get a feel there. That's as much a position of any. I think that one, and like when you see the receivers run like the gauntlet drills, I think that shows you sometimes who's real easy catchers. And, like Jaden Higgins runs that gauntlet drill going straight, and you can see how the ball's just softly hits his hands versus the guys that have to really like cognitively watching the ball get into their hands and then secured. And then they're running a little bit of this route on the gauntlet, where it's supposed to be more of a straight line.
Uh, Defensive tackle Ya Black. This is a bigger guy in his defense. 5'3", 940, 188, 10-yard split. That doesn't have to be the end of the world because he is bigger, but 25 and a half inch vert, 8 foot 5 inch broad, 7'6", 3 cone, 4'7", 20-yard shuttle. So testing's poor. That's not a deal breaker for me because he is a little bit of a bigger guy, but it's still not good. And there was some other stuff going on with him, I think, as well.
Yeah, a guy you might wonder if maybe on the tape, which the tape can be pretty decent at times to where he can maybe elevate himself into sort of fourth round territory, where this pushes him, I think, more into sort of late 5 to 6 territory, but still a guy that could give you maybe nose tackle snaps and functional snaps at that later on in the draft.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about him going into the combine, so I can't say a ton, but yeah.
He's a good nose tackle, but definitely those are pretty bad testing times. He's going to be one of those nose tackles that can't move outside the phone booth of space.
Nose tackle Deonnie Walker. He didn't run a 40 because nobody needed to see that. That would have made like the rating of the show like rated. It would have been rated R, and they would have had to they would have gotten in trouble with the MPAA and stuff if they actually
that cottage cheese bouncing around would have made everybody vomit watching that thing live. That thing. Yeah.
So all he did was the jumps, 25-inch vert, 8 foot 8 inch broad, and then he did. I think the drills were like you shuffle back and forth, and we didn't need to see that either, to be perfectly honest.
He looks horrible, right? I mean, he looks horrible when he's moving around. He does not look good. He looks slow. He looks stiff. He looks unathletic. And then he doesn't do these rest of these testing times, Brendan, which is a dead on indicator of the fact that he was going to test incredibly slow. That's why he didn't test those. So, this is a guy that I was already really, 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 getting cool on as I was watching more of his tape. Bad Senior Bowl, and then this kind of performance on top of it. I'm good on Walker. Somebody else can go take that flyer.
I'm pretty disappointed because I liked him a lot before the season started. I was intrigued.
Yep. Just a guy who doesn't play with a lot of fire, man. He does not play with a lot of energy, does not play with a lot of tenacity or grit. He should be way better than he is as a player with the physical skill set that he has.
Linebacker Jay Higgins, not the Jaden Higgins. Jaden Higgins is the good one, the receiver. Yeah. This is Jay Higgins, the linebacker. 4'8", 240, 164, 10-yard split, 33-inch vert, 9 foot 2 broad, 701 3 cone, 4.35 20-yard shuttle. Pretty forgettable. Not much to be excited about there.
The shuttle was good. The shuttle's great. He's got the top shuttle time, but everything else was trash.
Yeah. I wonder how that happens. Like you're just really good at shuttling back and forth, but all the other movement skills.
You did the shuttle drill. You've been working on those shuttle drills with the cones, I guess. But 4'8" too for a guy that is a little. He's under. He's 224, man. 6 foot 224, running a 4'8" too. You go, you got to be like 4'5" if you're going to be at that size.
Yeah. And your final guy here in the fallers was Zy Alexander, cornerback, 4'5", 640, 153, 10-yard split. Pretty mediocre, but not terrible. 31.5-inch vert, 9 foot 8 inch broad, though. That's not going to get you all that excited. I didn't know too much about this guy going into the combine, so I didn't really have much of a take on him in the first place.
He was looked at as, I think, a guy that could be a guy elevated into sort of second round territory of things. But I think between all the testing times, the fact he's got the 31-inch long arms, which are going to be a little bit shorter than you see as ideal as well, I think that does ding him down a round or two on the back end of this because he was looked at as, I think, as one of the more higher riser cornerbacks kind of walking into it on the tape a little bit. So 153 is a good 10-yard split there, but the 4.56 is probably a little bit slower than you like. 31.5-inch vert. You're worried about a little bit of the explosiveness and speed there on him, I think, coming out of this.
Right. I guess the guy I would add to that list, this is kind of obvious, but Will Howard had a really rough combine. Those throws were bad. And I liked Will Howard. I was a Will Howard guy, but I don't know now. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, those were brutal throws. He made some really brutal throws. And another guy I've got in the third round with Jackson Dart, kind of in the same area. And I don't think I'll change my draft grade on it, but that's why I've got those guys in the place they're at. They're kind of flyers. Excuse me.
Milroe needs to move to tight end. He looked awful too, I think.
Jalen Milroe, tight end all day. I think that's where he's going to go. I don't think that he's a natural quarterback. It's what he needs to do.
Yeah. Probably a couple other guys, but I think we're good now. We've gone about 3 hours now, which is more than I expected. But when a big trade request comes through, then there's going to be more going on. So for sure. So anything else you want to add on before we hit this free agency in just 4 days?
I just think I would say to the fan base, I know that there's a lot of impatience there, and I know that there's a budding amount of anger, especially if this DK trade becomes fulfilled. That's a favorite player of a lot of people, and I know that John Schneider has not necessarily earned the benefit of the doubt with his recent given track record. I can appreciate all of this, and I don't disagree with any of it. I get it. I would just say that if this team is taking a little bit of a longer term approach to try to be open-minded to that, in that it may take this to get to a contending state, and that if that's the goal they're trying to get to, this is maybe the road they have to go down with it. And it's going to be a little bit of pain in the short term, but I really believe in the long term that this will pay off if they take this approach.
A couple quick little news updates from around the league. Nothing to do with the Seahawks, but Evan Ingram just got released by the Jaguars. That's an interesting Noah Fant replacement if we decide to release him after all, I guess.
That could
Also,
be.
Devin Duvernay, 2-time Pro Bowl return man. If we don't keep Darden, then that's actually really interesting to me. I really want to get that return position taken care of so I never have to think about it again.
I would as well. I've got no problem making that a point of emphasis / priority.
And the Giants re-signed Tommy Cutlets. So,
Let's go.
Love that. We love that, right?
Big deal there. Big deal.
Yeah. If we traded Geno, I wanted to sign Tommy Cutlets, though. If I can't be good, I want to at least be memorable, and Tommy Cutlets would have made you memorable.
There we go.
All right, man. Thanks for
that. At least be entertaining.
All right. Thanks for the great show, man. 3 hours, 5 minutes about. Hope everybody in the chat had fun. Big turnout today. A lot of people in the chat. Thank you for coming out. We will do this again next week. By next week, we should know what's up, right? We should have more than enough information to say this team is going for it, or this team is not going for it.
Indeed. Well, we'll know about DK, we'll know about Geno, and we'll know that answer. So 3 real big question marks that we can't answer right now that will be, I think, we'll know for sure by that point next week.
All right. So next week's show is probably going to just be about that. We're going to talk about what the team has done over the last week, because I anticipate a lot of things will have happened. Thank you for doing this with me again. Thank you to everybody in the chat. I will be seeing y'all later. And this is one of the more important weeks for the Seattle Seahawks in a while. This is one of the most important weeks, maybe ever, you could say, because it's not just the things that are going to happen. It's the things that are going to be forced to happen after these things happen. We are going to learn a lot. It's a very interesting time. And all I ask of the fans is that you keep an open mind and you understand there are multiple ways to get to where we want to get to. And just because we don't take the path you wanted to take, that doesn't mean that we're not going to get to where you want to get to. So I'm going to say it, and then we're getting out of here. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.